Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 87 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. The other voice you will hear, as always, is Matt Feuerstein. Matt, this is kind of a crazy milestone because today, the day we are recording, likely the day that the night this will come out, is 5 years to the day since the day the first episode of ThROH The Years came out. 5 goddamn years we've been doing this. I don't know, Matt, there are not many things in my life like I have voluntarily done that weren't necessary to keep me alive for 5 straight years. This podcast is now one of them.
Wow. Well, I'm honored that you have stuck it out with me for this long because I know that I have a really annoying voice. So anybody that wants to have kept listening for this whole time, wow, what a masochist. No, but seriously, and I feel like we've grown in that time, which is amazing to me because it was just, the idea was just us. We were like, we want to do this and maybe we can do it and let people listen to it. And we would do it anyway, even if no one did. Yeah. But somehow there are a few people that do, and they somehow still do. And I guess part of it, even though Ring of Honor was, the promotion was more popular in 2017, than it is now, or, at least was when it stopped running a few months ago. I feel like in other ways, Ring of Honor, the name Ring of Honor and the history of Ring of Honor is more relevant and salient now than it was then. So I guess, we stuck it out long enough to where we are, we're more relevant than we were. So I guess that's pretty surprising.
Yeah, you were ahead when you came with the idea. I think you were ahead of the curve. I feel like the wave of Ring of Honor nostalgia for the early years kind of came probably a year or two into the show. And now, with all the AEW stuff about Bryan Danielson really bringing back a lot of his old Ring of Honor stuff, and CM Punk just openly referencing it all the time stuff. I feel like it's really gotten big now, the Ring of Honor nostalgia where people are kind of looking back for the first time. But I feel like we kind of started the show a little bit before that really happened. We were actually ahead of the curve slightly on that.
I guess it's good because we have a bank of shows that people can go back to now if they get a Ring of Honor nostalgia kick. As for me, it's just a sad commentary on how I'm just living a life where I'm obsessed with nostalgia because certainly I have nothing to look forward to. So it's much better to look back and enjoy the times that were fun. And Ring of Honor was a big, fun time for me. So, when I was an attendee of Ring of Honor, not when I was never a participant, but I did attend a lot of shows, and that was a lot of fun for a long time. So yeah, I'm proud, I think, of the podcast. I'm proud that I have my association with you. How about that? I'll put it that way.
I'm proud of knowing you. In fact, I would like to basically thank everyone quickly. We've only done this once before, I think, right at the end of a year-end episode, not one of our recap episodes, but it was just an episode we were recording near the end of the year, and I kind of thank people. And so there'll probably be a lot of repeats here, but I just thought it's been 5 years. We probably won't do a lot of thank yous again for another long time. So I'd like to thank everybody. I just wrote down a few people quick and I'm sure I'll miss somebody, but first, Cubs fan, obviously, someone that we've known since we were teenagers, Cubs fan known now to be the English language lucha guy with the lucha blog. But, he was the original guy to host our show on his own website. And, he hosted your original podcast, Listem and Learn, Joe Gagne's Joe versus the World, our friend Justin Shapiro show. And Cubs, he did make a dime off it. All the, his site isn't some major site, which is mostly his occasionally place for him to throw up blog thoughts and stuff. And so
I actually did pay him a dime once.
Okay,
he made a dime off of it.
You son of a bitch, Cubs, you money grubbing. No, but any work he did, to create feeds or upload stuff, or, I think right before we left, he made a little scratch logo for us and stuff like that. All that stuff, he got not a dime. I mean, he got apparently one dime from it. And, it was so kind of him. And, when we left after only 5 episodes, he was very accepting of that and just oh, hey, if you guys ever need to come back, and just a sweetheart of a guy. And, got everything off the ground. Chad Campbell, who is the co-host of Where the Big Boys Play podcast. We've always talked about how that was kind of like a show we were both fans of, one of the great old wrestling podcasts. We plug it fairly often on this show. And it was crazy. He was one of the first people to ever praise the show, which was crazy because it was something where we had talked about before we started the show. You had mentioned hey, what if we did a show that was kind of Where the Big Boys Play, but it could be of that kind of quality, but about Ring of Honor. And then one of the first, neither of us knew Chad. And so him to come out of nowhere and post a message that hey, this is, enjoyed this, and then invite us onto the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network, which we still are to this day. That was unbelievably cool. And just, again, another really nice guy who's always been really positive and just one of the more underrated wrestling podcast guys out there.
He'll be on the show soon. I can tell you, it's in the near future, we're going to get Chad on the show.
And also just thank everyone at the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network for, again, doing the work like Cubs of uploading the shows and making tweets about them over the years and all that stuff.
Stephen Graham uploads our podcast now, and he's been on a bunch of times, so very much want to thank him for all the help and all the support that he's given us over the years.
Absolutely, and he's actually in my guest section, but that's another great thing to point out. He actually is now the guy who actually uploads our show to the PWO feed now. An honorable mention, the other Ring of Honor podcast that started after us, I hate them because they make us look bad because they post much more frequently than we do all sorts of other stuff, extras, but really good show. Obviously, if you had a dime for every time we mentioned them or they mentioned us on one of our shows, you'd be far richer than Matt Made the Cubs fan.
That's right. Way richer than the Cubs fan.
But, Jeff's also been a guest on the show. They've had us on their show. Just, good guys. I hate the fact that we're very self-deprecating on this show. So I used to love that we used to be able to say we're the best Ring of Honor podcast out there. And I could honestly say that because I think we were the only really ongoing, retro Ring of Honor podcast.
For about a year, it was true.
Yeah. And now we always have the best I can say is top 2. So that's kind of a horrible thing they've done to us, Matt. But overall, they are lovely people. And it's been very nice that they've mentioned us a lot and had us on and all that. Just lovely people. Gabe Sapolsky, who has, you might have heard of him if you listen to the show. He was the booker of Ring of Honor. He has mentioned us fairly frequently. He has listened to the show, and it's weird. Part of me is almost hesitant to praise him just because I'm always hyper aware of people thinking oh, are they going to be biased towards? I like to think if you listen to the show long enough, you would know that we're pretty, I think, honest. I mean, we have nothing really to gain or lose from being honest about our opinions here.
I will just admit, I am biased toward Ring of Honor in this era. That's why I did the podcast. Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always going to come from a positive bent because, I mean, we're not reviewing this for any other reason that we grew up really liking this era of Ring of Honor. But I obviously, Gabe's been nice to us, and I would just say one thing to Gabe, and I don't know how many wrestlers, if any wrestlers, have ever listened to the show, but I always am really aware of it's got to be hard to listen to anyone talk about a thing you did, because I am sure there is countless times we have criticized a booking decision or a match where Gabe or the wrestlers involved could hear it and say, well, you don't know why that happened. I botched that move because of this. This match was bad because I was sick. I had to make this booking decision because my hands were tied. There are all sorts. Something you learn in life is there are all sorts of stories behind so many things that you go, why the hell did that happen? Usually, there's not only a good reason behind why that happened or didn't happen, but usually the person involved is as aware that it didn't go great as you, the fan, are at home is. They just aren't going to tell you why. Oh, this is why this screwed up, and so I'm just hyper aware of to anyone that's been involved with Ring of Honor and heard us talk about it. I hope you can accept that we're just fans giving our honest opinions, and I don't apologize for our opinions or anything like that. But I also am very aware of how difficult it could probably be to listen to people that were not involved talk about the thing you were involved with. So the fans, I'd like to obviously thank them. I mean, anyone that's ever listened to one episode,
Wait,
retweeted
Trevor.
a tweet.
I'm sorry to interrupt your very kind thanks, but we do not call them fans, Trevor.
Oh yeah, our deep vein thrombosos. I completely forgotten.
Thank you,
Matt. I apologize. I am embarrassed. We should redo the show. Start over. No, but our deep vein thrombosos. Anyone that's ever done anything, retweeted, plug the show, listened to even one episode, given a comment, anything. I always say the most valuable commodity you have is time. You have so many options for podcasts and entertainment in general. The fact that you even listen to a minute of us is humbling. The amount of people that listen to us is way more than I ever thought it would be. Not that we're like world beaters, but I think it's way more than either of us thought it ever would be the last time we saw any kind of representative numbers. And Matt, you know what's crazy? I was noticing the last episode is, like, have you ever noticed, Matt, occasionally, like, we will upload an episode, and then someone will comment about something on Twitter that of the episode, like, an hour later, and I always thought, like, I can't imagine, for some reason, like, I can imagine people liking the show. I can't imagine people that are, like, so into the show that when we upload on a Saturday night, they're like, I've got to start listening to this immediately. Like, that always blows my mind when someone's like, an hour later, like, oh yeah, that thing you just sound like, wait, we just uploaded that. Like, you shouldn't be allowed to listen to it yet. Like, it blows my mind.
We're the perfect people to lull someone to sleep on a Saturday night.
One of our first positive comments was someone saying, like, don't take this the wrong way, but this is a great show to fall asleep to. And so,
yeah.
Matt, more honest than you would comment than you would know.
Yep.
And then finally, quick rundown of our guests. Joe Gagne, piece of shit. Justin Shapiro. No, seriously, Joe Gagne. I mean, wonderful guy. He's been on a million shows. One of the godfathers of wrestling podcasts. Just so easy to do a podcast with. Just a pleasant, comforting presence. Justin Shapiro, another person we've known since we were teenagers. One of the funniest people I think we both know. I know Ring of Honor is not his thing, so I always thank him for coming on the show and indulging us. And I guess I should thank you for dragging him to the shows that you did. Great person. Alan Cunahan, just one of the nicest, most knowledgeable guys out there. Another guy I almost can't believe he likes our show, because that guy has just seen so much, heard so much. Dr. Keith Lipinski, someone actually involved in indie wrestling, a guy who was at the shows. I always think it's kind of crazy when anyone that was at the shows at the time, not crazy, but like, I think it always makes me breathe a little sigh of relief when people that were at the shows that lived through Ring of Honor at the time like it, because I feel like, we're not getting it wrong. And obviously we lived through it at the time, and Matt, you were at many of those shows, but to have other outside voices in your position.
The only thing that I know for sure that I got super wrong was thinking that a lot of people kicked out of the J Driller, which I said on the first episode through the years, and clearly I think that happened like once since we started watching. So yeah.
Maybe the count will start when they come back. Maybe you're just remembering like second era Briscoes.
We'll see. It's coming soon.
Yeah, we are approaching that era. Joe Sposto, another wonderful guest, the former Leonard F Carson. That was a guy I couldn't believe listened to the show. I was like, man, I think he was the first, like, from indie wrestling. He actually listens. They're allowed to listen to our show. I didn't know that would happen. And just another really, the one time we had him on our show, like, just wonderful guy, makes you feel good. And another guy that's was really like humbling down on the show, not just because of his past and because he's just a good podcaster. He has two podcasts, Long Box Heroes and At Odds with Wrestling, you should check out. But also because anyone that follows him on Twitter knows that guy listens to more podcasts than I think is humanly possible. You will just reel off the list of podcasts. And so to be on the menu of a guy who has just a voracious appetite for them, that was humbling. Jeff Schwartz, we already mentioned from an honorable mention, but obviously he was also a great guest. Stephen Graham, we already mentioned, but he was also a great guest, and you should listen to Maybe Not Taue, his new podcast, which, Matt, you've already guested on. And thing about Stephen, he's another guy kind of like Chad Campbell, where he is just, a little bit underrated. He's done so many wrestling podcasts. Like, just look up all, like, you could listen to a bajillion hours, I think is the scientific number, of a podcast Stephen Graham's done with a variety of people about so many different topics. It's like he and Alan, really, of the people on this list, are the people that have just covered the most ground. And, people should check that stuff out if you like good wrestling podcasts. And then finally, our last guest, not our most recent, but Aaron Taub of, the formerly of the Everything Evolves podcast, another really nice guy, another guy, again, we've been so blessed where so many of our guests have been on really great podcasts that I was already a fan of. And just, it was humbling to hear that, most of our guests have expressed an interest of being on the show, because I always feel nervous about asking anyone to do a time obligation for, you know me, man, I have a hard time asking anyone for anything. So having people kind of ask, say, hey, I'd like to be on the show, and having so many talented people, knowledgeable people, that's been really humbling. So we've been really lucky with all our guests. And then finally, Matt, I'd like to thank you. And it's hard to thank you, because the one thing you have taught me is how annoying I must be, because you're the only person I know that comes close to being as self-deprecating as I am. And so I've never really known in my life the bittersweet joy, the frustration of someone that all your compliments just bounce off of them. But until I met you, Matt. But you are like the ultimate 5-tool player. Like, you're smart, you're funny, you're knowledgeable, you're not afraid to stick up for yourself, but you're also not someone that's just constantly disagreeing just to be the hot takes guy. You're kind of the conscience of the show sometimes. And I was mentioning this, I think, before the show. My memory's already that bad. I can't remember what I said before the show started the show. But I think I was trying to think of things I hadn't said other times on the show about why you're a great co-host. But I guess the best comment I can think of is I have not stuck with many things in my life. I will reveal this right now, Matt. I don't know how to ride a bicycle, because the first day I rode on a bike, I fell off it and I immediately quit and said, I'm never learning how to ride a bicycle. And I just stayed in our family basement for years. I took skating lessons. The first time I took a skating lesson, I fell on my ass. I immediately after that lesson said, I don't want to take skating lessons anymore. If I'm not good at something immediately, I quit it. My life is a parade of half-finished books, half-finished courses, half-finished video games, movies, TV shows, everything. This is one of the only things I've ever stuck with. And I was kind of thinking the other day, why is that? Why have I stuck with this for 5 years? And the only thing that really kept feeling true to me was because of you. Because you make it so easy and so pleasurable. I don't think, not only do I not think I would have stuck with started a podcast with anyone else but you, I think if somehow I don't know if I would have stuck with it for 5 years if it was with anybody but you.
Well, thank you very much. But you are right that all of that makes me extremely uncomfortable. I definitely will not agree with some of the things you said about me as far as the smart and funny stuff. But
of course.
I will say that I have really, really, really enjoyed doing this with you. You amaze me, just all the time, how diligent you are, how thorough you are, how insightful you are about, obviously the stuff that we cover on ROH, but also just basically any topic that you want to delve into. It's remarkable. So you said that you quit a lot of things if you're not good at it right away. Well, the good news is that means that there's a lot of stuff that you can do, because there's a lot of stuff that you're good at, right away. And you're an extremely, extremely talented person. You are 100% the reason people listen to this show. It's not even close. I know you won't ever admit that, but it's definitely true. You could have I will accept that our relationship and our friendship has made this easier for you to want to keep doing it. But as far as putting out something that people would listen to, you could do this with basically anyone and people would still listen, because you're the reason people listen. 100%.
Rage growing like that.
100%. And I hope to, you keep, doing whatever, whether it's wrestling or anything, for a lot of years, because you have so much to offer in terms of intellect, insight, humor. And I know everyone listening who's listened a lot agrees with that. Everyone who follows you on Twitter or has read your columns, you just put out another great writing piece about Tony Schiavone that everyone should read or listen to. Maybe I'll do an audio version of it. You could just listen to me reading Trevor Dame's voice. I feel like that would be great for me, but maybe not for your ears. But seriously, you're the best thing to listen, the reason to listen to this podcast, and my favorite part as well. So thank you. And guess what, everybody? This is Oscars weekend, and you finally just heard through Trevor Dame a thank you speech that somebody actually got to finish.
Probably, they would have started playing the music to play me off very early on into that speech. But the best thing I can do to show my appreciation to you, Matt, and to the listeners at this point is to not dispute a lot of your compliments, even though I desperately want to, and move on. So I realized that was a bit of a lengthy thank you. But you know what? We're only going to be turn 5 once. We don't do this very often in all the thank yous. And I feel like at 5 years, kind of everyone that's really helped the show deserves a thank you. So everyone pat yourselves on the back.
Thank you, and we're sorry.
Of course. And as always, we have 3 feeds of Through the Years. We have the YouTube feed, we have the Pro Wrestling Only feed, and we have just the Through the Years THROH feed. So pick your poison, 3 different ways to listen. As Matt mentioned, I do have an article on FanBite, spell bite with a Y, about Tony Schiavone. I wrote some tweets about Tony Schiavone a few weeks ago and got asked to write a column about Tony Schiavone, and I did, and I got plenty of nice compliments about it. So if that kind of thing interests you, go look for it at FanBite in their not video game section, and it's like a 15-minute read. It's pretty long, and reward them by clicking on ads or whatever, because not to brag or anything, but they paid me for it. And if you don't think I didn't get an immediate complex and feel guilty about that and worry about it, so everyone just click on some ads so that it rewards them for doing that. And that's about it. Let's finally get to the show. Matt, I've got a few little pieces of news that we always like to cover, the news that in between the shows we've covered. We've got a piece of news. It is perfect for the 5-year anniversary because it brings back an old reoccurring storyline in Through the Years back, an old friend. It comes full circle, and I just love this. I love how much I hate this. This is from the Wrestling Observer. Dave Meltzer writes, Ring of Honor has been financially self-sufficient for the past several months because of DVD and merchandise sales, which would be the first time in its history that is the case, and is a real major breakthrough because how many promotions are truly self-sufficient?
How many indeed?
Matt, how many times in the 5 years of Through the Years has Dave Meltzer and occasionally Wade Keller said, Ring of Honor, it breaks even. Ring of Honor is self-sufficient. And how many times did that come before the massive Rob Feinstein scandal, where all of a sudden it came out, Rob Feinstein has lost 6 figures on Ring of Honor. Kerry Silken has already pumped in over 6 figures into Ring of Honor. There's this huge debt. It's always been a massively money-losing, and no one ever came out and said, kind of put 2 and 2 together and then said, now that we're learning this, we should say, we were wrong, and maybe we should reflect on why we believed whoever was telling us that they were a break-even company, and why were they telling us that? And instead, here they are, months and months later, and it's the same thing. It's literally the same thing again. They are back to saying it's break-even again when Kerry Silken does a podcast with Ian Riccoboni. I think it's Last Stop Penn Station. And I haven't listened to a ton of it. I've been so busy, but I've listened to clips of some episodes. And I think there was one episode I was listening to where Kerry Silken, I believe he said there was only one show that Ring of Honor during his era ever turned a profit on. At least from maybe there were shows that turned a profit after the DVD sales were factored in, but from just the live gate, only one in history. And I think he said that was one of the WrestleMania weekend 2006 shows. And it was this company was never self-sufficient, at least on a regular basis. I guess I will say maybe if there was a time, if it ebbed and flowed, maybe this was a time, because this was right around the time, probably that Joe versus Kobashi was coming out on DVD, and that was their biggest selling DVD by all accounts that they ever had. And I can imagine that probably sold a lot of DVDs, not just of that show itself, but probably people going, if I'm buying this, why don't I buy another couple,
Yeah, but that wouldn't have been factored in by this point. Like that DVD had just come out.
But yeah, you're right. I do think, though, if there probably was a time that Ring of Honor was ever self-sufficient, it probably was the next couple months, I would imagine.
Yeah, sure. I think it's just a case of like the reporters who report that stuff, and just take the promotion's word for it. They just think because ROH is such a small company that it's not important enough that they examine it and get it right, I guess. Because obviously with WWE, they would never just be like, oh yeah, we made this. And they're like, oh, okay. And which is funny because to this day, which is almost 16 and a half years after that report that you just read, has there been a American wrestling promotion that has been self-sufficient, break even, like, to this day, other than WWE?
I have no idea how PWG does, but I mean, I know they've stayed in business at the same level for a long time.
But like, is it all because of money that is made by PWG, or is there people pumping in other money? Like, I
have no idea.
But you know what I mean? Like, it seems like there's a decent chance that no wrestling promotion other than WWE has ever been self-sufficient in America since this time. Like, it seems like at least possible.
Yeah, I mean, even AEW, which a lot of people would argue, I would argue is a big success. I think they said it would be a bit of a profit at this point if they didn't factor in that, like, Tony Khan is fronting a large amount of money to develop the first AEW video game, but like, even that, they're,
and who knows if that's true.
But even that, like, they're not. I don't think would be raking in huge profits at this point if that video game thing wasn't there. And yeah, it's just, I feel like even a lot of the long running indies, they're these labors of love where, they're probably they run at a loss. Like, they're things where people sink in money because they enjoy it, and hopefully they have to run to a degree where they don't have to sink too much money into it. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine there are a lot of notable wrestling companies that have been consistently self-sufficient without having to sink in extra money. Sean Radican wrote, and Sean Radican, like, on the PW Torch site, he would sometimes write Ring of Honor news, but sometimes he would report news from the Ring of Honor Newswire as well. And the problem is sometimes I can't tell the difference because a lot of the Ring of Honor old newswires are not available on the, like, archive.org Wayback Machine. So this is me saying, I don't know if this is Sean reporting something that might be a Ring of Honor website and that's maybe tinged as a storyline, or an actual piece of news. I think it's an actual piece of news. I'm not 100% sure because I couldn't cross-reference it with the Ring of Honor website. But either way, it was interesting. Sean wrote, Ring of Honor announcer Lenny Leonard quit and then returned to the company in the span of 24 hours last weekend. Leonard and Ring of Honor booker Gabe Sapolsky had a disagreement backstage at an FIP event last Saturday, but cooler heads prevailed, and Leonard announced that he would stay with Ring of Honor as a commentator on home releases.
I don't remember that ever being a storyline, so yeah, I tend to think it's true.
I mean, Lenny did a lot of good work for Ring of Honor. It would be something, I wonder what would have happened if he had left at this point. I guess Mr. St. Laurent or whatever, who ends up coming in and filling in for months and months when Lenny gets injured, maybe he just would have come in earlier and stuck around. I'm not sure what they would have done. Would Gabe have returned? Would we have been having a Gabe Prazak team for a long time? Who knows? And then Sean Radican also reported, BJ Whitmer will miss Ring of Honor's event being held in Long Island, New York tonight, which is the show we are covering in just a minute. Due to injuries he suffered in a car accident, he hopes to return to action by December 17th for Final Battle 2005. So I forget what Whitmer was supposed to be booked for on this show, but he does in fact miss this show. And that show that we are covering is a night of tribute. It took place November 19th, 2005. At the Sports Plus Entertainment Center in Long Island, New York, in front of a reported crowd of 500 fans, so significantly less than the last show, which had Mick Foley's Goodbye and the AJ Styles Jimmy Rave blow-off match. I think that show drew 650 or something. And of course, why it is called a night of tribute is because the show took place, I think 1 day less than a week after Eddie Guerrero passed away. The title's also playing off of, I believe, the third show Ring of Honor ever did, which was A Night of Appreciation, which was Eddie Guerrero's second and final Ring of Honor show and kind of his send-off from the indies. And so this is kind of a reference to that, and also it is a night of tribute to Eddie Guerrero. Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer, the crowd was lackluster most of the night, which probably stems still from the Guerrero situation. Matt, I didn't think this crowd was that bad in terms of crowd reaction. I don't think they were like one of the best we've heard, but I didn't notice it being like an especially quiet crowd either.
No, I did not think so either. Long Island always gets this rep as having these horrible crowds. And I have been to shows there where that had like bad crowds, but no, this was not so bad. Neither was Glory by Honor, the last show that they did in this venue. Also, even if it had been bad, I would be very skeptical of the notion that it was because of Eddie Guerrero, but that's a whole other story. We've heard way worse crowds than this.
Yeah.
They were up for the things that they needed to be up for.
I think that's a great way to put it. And in terms of Eddie Guerrero, obviously, like we've talked about Eddie Guerrero. If you really want, I think we had our thoughts on him on like probably the first two of the first three shows, because he works two of the first three shows. But so Era of Honor begins and Night of Appreciation, and he has our Eddie Guerrero thoughts there. But obviously, one of the greats, utter tragedy. He left us so soon. And
how did you learn about him dying? Because not to make this about me, although I am one of the co-hosts of the show, so I guess it's sort of okay to make it about you. Yeah, I remember when I was still working that retail job that I was talking about a few shows ago, and I was working, so I didn't answer the phone. I had my ringer off, and I remember on break looking at my voicemails, and there was a voicemail from Justin Shapiro. And from Albert Ching, who is works for DC Comics, now one of my good longtime friends, part of the same internet scene that you and I met on all those years ago. Yeah. And he'll probably be on the show at some point in the next 18 months or so. But
that'd be great.
We're internet friends, so we usually communicate via the internet. I guess at the time we were still using instant messenger mostly. Crazy to think about, but then seeing voicemails from them was very unusual, and they were both calling to tell me that Eddie Guerrero died, and it was really fucking crazy. And just to show how big of a deal that is, you don't have too many wrestlers that 16 and a half years later, whenever someone does one of their moves, you still get chants for them after they die. It's not like in 2005, people were doing Bruiser Brody chants, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or I'm trying to think of other wrestlers who died, 16-ish years before this. You didn't hear people really reacting big to Kerry Von Erich spots in, in the early 2000s, but Eddie Guerrero, it still feels as raw now as it did in 2005, which is crazy. I mean, maybe it's just part of the aging of the wrestling audience, that the audience who watches wrestling now are still the same people that watched it then, and we're not getting a lot of new fans. Maybe it's part of that. But it also is just the impact that he had. Wow, what a big deal he was, and what a big deal it was to lose him at that time. And I'll talk more about it as they get to their tributes on this show, but it just reminded me of how tasteless WWE was in how they responded over the next several months.
I actually don't remember. I only remember, when I can really think about it, learning about two wrestling deaths. The other ones, I don't remember where I was. Those deaths are Owen Hart and Chris Candido, as weird as that is. Kind of a weird one to remember. But the Owen Hart one was because this was, dating myself. This was back in the era where if you couldn't afford to watch a pay-per-view, you could turn to the pay-per-view channel and it would be all scrambled, and you could listen to the pay-per-view and occasionally make out an image for a second. Or if you're a teenager trying to discover your sexuality, you could look at the scrambled porn and occasionally see a weird misshapen green boob. But either way, so when I wasn't looking at green boobs, I was listening to
Come on, you still like looking at green boobs.
Definitely. I mean, Matt, have you been scrolling through my browser history?
Been reading Jolly Green Giant fan fiction.
I like nothing but She-Hulk fan fiction. But I remember like getting home late from something and I turned it on and I could just hear in their voices something was weird. And then eventually, like, I think I heard like Jim Ross make the announcement that, Owen Hart has passed away. And I remember just running into the living room to tell my parents, who did not care about wrestling, Owen Hart's dead, Owen Hart's dead. And then, of course, I ran online to confirm it. And I'm sure my parents thought, like, oh, God, this kid is so stupid. He thinks wrestling is real. And, of course, this was, unfortunately, very real. And the other one was Chris Candido. And that was just, I always remember where I was because I was on a family vacation, and it was just a horrible family vacation from hell, and I was going through internet withdrawals, and we finally got to a hotel, and I was like, if it's the last thing I'm doing, I'm going to get to the computer in the lobby, and I am going to use the internet, and I'm going to read about pro wrestling for the first time in a few days. This is how sad my existence was. I just needed an escape. I go to the PW Torch website, and I'm just like, oh, Chris Candido's dead? And it was just like this huge bummer, like, oh, I was just looking to have some fun for 15 minutes, and I've agreed to it this really tragic, yet another way tragic before their time, just when like it looked like things were turning around for them, wrestling death, which is, I guess, in a way, the Eddie Guerrero death as well. This idea of this guy has this big redemption arc and then doesn't get to enjoy it for that long. And
yeah, wasn't like he booked to probably win the title like right before, right?
Yeah, I believe
right, like when he was like the night that he died or something like that, the night after.
He was going to go over Batista, I believe, and get another, and start a big feud with him. And yeah, I mean,
crazy.
He was probably as popular as he ever was when he passed away. I mean,
yeah, had he turned face again, or was he still a heel? That I don't remember.
My memory's bad, but I mean, either way, he was in line for a main event program again.
Yeah.
On his brand, and yeah, but we actually opened the show with ring announcer Bobby Cruz in the ring, and the Ring of Honor roster surrounding the ring on the outside. Bobby announces that they're going to have a 10-bell salute for Eddie Guerrero. We then see an on-screen graphic that states that tonight's show is dedicated to his memory. We get the 10-bell salute, so that's the little opening thing for him. We'll get another tribute, a couple of little minor tributes to him throughout the show. At this point, Matt, we jump backstage for a Samoa Joe promo, and we get an on-screen graphic telling us that this is from ringofhonorwrestling.com, and it definitely makes sense because this was originally on the website, because this is the kind of a promo I would say is way better suited for the website than a DVD, because it feels almost out of place here in my opinion. What this promo is Samoa Joe going through basically every single major beat of his Ring of Honor career with video highlights accompanying every career point he's talking about for almost 10 straight minutes. It's too long to recap. It's all things we've already covered on the podcast, but the only thing you really need to know is it ends with Joe reiterating his current goal at this time of becoming Ring of Honor's first Triple Crown winner, winning all three titles, which he would need to win the tag titles to finally accomplish that. He says he's going to do it with his protege, Jay Lethal, someone who he says has the potential to be the very best. And I thought like Joe did a good enough, like it was a good job of being in character, but kind of honestly like recapping his Ring of Honor run. But it was one of the kind of things where it was like, it's a good introduction to Samoa Joe if you've never followed him in Ring of Honor. But like on a DVD you paid for, it just felt like way too much recap.
It was too long. That said, I always enjoy Joe's promo, so I didn't mind it. I like the trip down memory lane. But yeah, it was redundant. The one thing that I thought was funny and noteworthy was he used the exact same line for when he talked about his matches with Kobashi and Jay Lethal. Like literally the exact same line with the exact same intonation. He says, but when he says it to Kobashi, he's like, Kobashi, in New York, we put it all on the line. And then he says again to Jay Lethal, like, I picked you as my protege. And then he goes, in New York, we put it all on the line. And I just like that exact like phrasing, saying it twice without realizing it. I thought that was pretty funny.
Maybe that's what Joe refers to all matches held in New York. Like when you go to New York, we put it all on the line.
But just like it, like he could have switched it up by saying like, in New York, we put it all on the line. And then later on, we put it all on the line in New York. But nope.
You want just that little bit of freshness.
Yeah, he put the in New York phrase prior to the we put it all on the line, both times.
And now we have 2 dark matches that we did not get to see on the show. In fact, there'll be other ones that I do not. We'll have to get to them later. There are matches that have been listed on some sites as occurring on the show. I don't know if they even occurred on this show or not. It was hard to find live reports for the show. But the dark matches I know for a fact that occurred that I don't think we saw. Lacey defeated Allison Danger in your classic, hey, we can have a women's match because these are 2 women managers we book on the show anyway. And then we also had Shane Hagedorn and Smash Bradley defeating Bobby Dempsey and Derek Dempsey in your standard students dark match. And that brings us to the show, the first match we saw on the DVD proper. The Ring Crew Express of Dunn and Marcos defeated Jason Blade and Kid Makazi in 6 minutes, 21 seconds when Dunn pinned Blade after Marcos hit a senton off the shoulders of Dunn. Matt, truly the biggest story of this match is Marcos cut his hair, completely killing the Ring Crew Express gimmick. It just isn't right to see Marcos with short hair.
Yeah, so when they started the gimmick, Marcos had short hair. And like this reminded me of like 2002 Marcos, because he did grow it out, and they definitely looked more like rockers after they both had long hair, and that was definitely noticeable and sad that he cut his hair. The match, so like it was all action. Like I will say that they really kept a good pace. They did a lot of stuff. They tried a lot of stuff. And so in some ways this was more memorable than other recent openers, and like kind of like it was fun. That said, the execution left a lot to be desired some of the time. One really noticeable one was when Marcos did a chest first like buckle on a whip, and let's just say he is not Bret Hart. When he took that buckle. They also do like Blade and Makazi do a total elimination, which is another one where you're just like, was not quite the original, but like they try, they do a lot of stuff, and sometimes you want that. Sometimes you just want a lot of stuff. For an opener, this is still Ring of Honor. It's still an indie show, so it's like, yeah, like it's not, it wasn't like the most professional match you've ever seen, but sometimes it's fun to just watch indie guys do a bunch of stuff. Marcos, Ring Crew Express do a bunch of their double teams early. Makazi gets to show his agility with a bunch of spinny kicks. They do a stereo like chop battle, which I definitely did not expect in this match. That's not something you would probably list on like what are the big spots in the Blade and Makazi versus Dunn and Marcos match, but it was one. Dunn gets a hot tag, does some decent stuff there. Prazak, a bunch of times during the match, he notes that he's impressed by Blade and Makazi, and I'm sure that was like something he was told to say, because like I guess at this point they were hoping to book them more. At the end, they go to arm in arm on the top rope and jump off with a combination front flip moonsault, and they miss, and then Dunn hits the gory bomb on Blade, and they hit the assisted sliced bread and the assisted senton to get the win. I was actually surprised, given how much they were like talking up Blade and Makazi, that the Ring Crew Express got the win here, but I guess they weren't ready to give them their full vote of confidence. But yeah, I thought it was kind of fun. I also thought it was very sloppy.
I completely agree. It was all action, kind of fun, fairly sloppy. I mean, that's basically my exact review. They worked the match pretty even, and it was funny because at first I was like, oh, this is pretty. I was kind of almost surprised though, this is pretty fun. And then after just one botch, then all of a sudden it was like I started noticing just how sloppy the mechanics were of a lot of stuff. And that botch was Blade and Makazi do this slingshot into a drop kick where Blade slingshots the guy, and then as he's like coming up, Makazi's supposed to hit him with a drop kick. And it seems like Makazi completely whiffs on the drop kick, but they find a camera angle that mostly hides the botch, but you can like still kind of tell, and you can hear a few people in the crowd like booing. And it was at that point where for some reason it was all of a sudden like they had put the Roddy Piper They Live glasses on me, because at that point I started seeing like every little hitch in their work and all the little execution things. But overall, there wasn't a lot of big botches, just it's not as smooth, like you were kind of saying, as other workers, but there was a lot of fun spots in this. That spot you talked about, I kind of described it where they link Makazi and Blade. They stand on the top rope, they link arm in arm, and one's facing the ring and one's not, and so they're basically like almost doing like a weird Spanish fly with no one in between them, with each guy facing in an opposite direction. And it looked pretty cool actually, but the opponents rolled out of the way, so they crashed and burned. And for some reason, I felt that made them look like really dorky. Like there's something about doing like a very involved kind of weird move when you're starting out in a company and completely like missing on it, even though it was an intentional miss because the guy rolled out of the way. I feel like that almost kind of makes you look more dorky. Like you should save that for when you're more established. But
save it for when the match calls for you to hit the move, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, it was so cool that it still got a holy shit chant, even though it crashed and burned. But overall, enjoyable for the sloppy thing it was. But, Matt, I thought it was interesting that you brought up how you noticed how many times they were kind of praising Blade McConaughey, because I didn't notice that in my notes as much as I noticed when I read The Observer afterwards. Dave wrote in The Observer, expect New England-based indie wrestler Jason Blade to be used more, as he was impressive on this show. So clearly, like, that was word getting sent out to them, like Jason Blade looks like a good one. And it's not that he looked bad here, but I didn't think watching this match that he looked like, oh my God, this is like an incredible one-night performance for him. But it seemed like for the next couple observers, like after this, it was like Jason Blade's going to be booked a lot more in Ring of Honor. Jason Blade looked good. And with you talking about the commentary, it was just like, maybe for some reason right around this time, Jason Blade season was high, Matt.
It was Jason Blade season. We celebrated it in my family, actually. I don't know what I'm saying.
We then see a blurry, nearly pitch black, undiscernible photo as a Dave Prazak voiceover tells us this is a photo taken by a fan of Jimmy Rave attacking Jade Chung and giving her a pedigree out on the pavement, at the end of the last show.
They said a digital image from a fan. I guess it just made sense because maybe just camera phones just had such bad cameras back then.
Dave says Jade has suffered a broken cheekbones and is out of professional wrestling as a result of this. So that is her being written out in the classic Ring of Honor fashion of woman gets attacked and is out of wrestling forever. Cut to Austin Aries and Roderick Strong backstage. Aries says time is running out for the Embassy, as this is the last show before they face them at Steel Cage Warfare in the big Steel Cage Warfare match. Aries says they have to put personal issues aside tonight, though, because Matt Sydal has a chance to become Ring of Honor World Champion, and Aries himself and Roddy have a chance to become number one contenders to the Ring of Honor Tag Team titles. Aries says he knows Roderick has been going through personal issues. Roddy says at this point he has something personal he has to, quote, get off his head, unquote, which I assume he meant to say get off my chest. Or maybe the thoughts that, like, it's like so many things they get when they get heated, heat rises, man. It's risen to his head. He has to get it off his head.
It's funnier than it should be.
He cuts a promo about Jade getting pedigreed, saying Rave just upped it another notch. Roderick tries really hard at this point, I would say, to sell being intense and emotional, but something just doesn't feel quite right. He's trying to make it feel emotionally weighty.
Bless his heart, he's trying on these promos. He is trying.
Yeah, I just wrote my notes. You don't really buy this is a guy who just saw his girlfriend's face get crushed.
No.
It's not, he can't hit that tone. And yeah, it was never his strong suit, and certainly this early stage of his career, it definitely wasn't his strong suit. But he was trying. At this point, Cage Match has Ricky Reyes defeating Eric Matlock in a match that did not make DVD. That would make sense. It does not air on DVD. Again, occasionally Cage Match will put matches on shows, and it turns out those matches just didn't happen on the shows, but I couldn't really find live reports that would load on the Wayback Machine, so I usually will cross-check things like that with live reports. This time, I'm not sure. There's one more match coming up that is also like that, which we'll get to, but a match I am definitely sure did happen, because we saw it. Jimmy Rave, scored to the ring by Prince Nana, defeated Davey Andrews via pinfall in 4 minutes, 17 seconds after he hit Greetings from Ghana, his new finisher, a.k.a. the pedigree. Before the match, Nana gets on the mic and he receives an immediate shut the fuck up chant. Nana says at Steel Cage Warfare, the Embassy is going to end Generation X's careers. He gloats about taking out Jade Chung. The crowd starts chanting boring at this point. Nana says he and Jimmy Rave are very upset at the way Ring of Honor fans treat Rave, and the next time fans throw toilet paper at him will be the last time Rave works for Ring of Honor. He then introduces Rave, who, of course, gets TP'd.
So he quit, and he never came back to Ring of Honor again. He was just stuck to TNA. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
just kidding.
Nana clearly has not read any parenting books, and, I mean, I haven't read parenting books either. I'm not a parent, but, like, I know enough to know that, like, you're not supposed to say empty threats, Matt. And I believe Rave and Nana already 2 or 3 times have said, if you throw toilet paper one more time, we're leaving Ring of Honor. And, of course, they never do. But I guess
you know you read parenting books all the time. It's your favorite.
Matt, I want to know what to expect when I'm expecting it. So I think I got to know. But much like the last show, Andrews follows up winning the top of the class trophy by getting squashed clean quickly by another heel who isn't generally known for big dominating wins with impressive, like, crushing squash match worthy offense. Rave actually gives Davey a fair bit of offense for a 3-minute match, even begging off at one point. And then he just kind of abruptly at the end of the match wins with a spear and greetings from Ghana. I felt like this match more than anything was not even just like a squash or Rave. It felt more than anything just like an excuse for the Nana promo and for a Rave to come out and let the crowd throw toilet paper at him. Like that was, to me, felt like the whole purpose.
Maybe he was going to work with BJ or something.
Maybe, yeah, that might have been it. Maybe it was Whitmer, Rave even, although that would have been kind of heel at this point, but it could have happened. But, yeah, again, we mentioned this on the last show where Davey Andrews got squashed by Adam Pearce. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things how Davey Andrews or any of the students gets booked, but it is still kind of weird that, like, the first 2 shows after Davey Andrews becomes the first top of the class champion, this new trophy and all this thing, this first kind of prominent win for him, he gets like squashed pretty easily by heels both times.
Yeah, I mean, the match was, so basic and it didn't really stand out to me that much. I agree with you about Andrews. Like, it's weird what they were doing with him. I guess it ended up being mostly not relevant.
Yeah.
But, it stood out to me that Long Island is worse than most of these crowds as far as what comes to, like, the homophobic chants. Mm-hmm. And these other crowds aren't great. But, like, they literally start a raves, F slur chant.
Yeah.
And, like, you don't quite hear that very much in ROH. You hear a lot of, they do the Jimmy Likes Balls thing, which
Foley actually started at the last Long Island show. He actually got on the mic and asked the crowd to do it, so that will stick. Yeah,
they started that. They do the, blah, 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 sucks dick chant, but the actual using the F slur, like in a chant, I feel like that's not, even in this era, that's not so common. And so it definitely stood out to me as jarring. It's one of those things. It is what it is. It's upsetting, but, as far as it goes, it was a fine squash, I guess. Like, I don't think, like, Rave looked so impressive, but it wasn't bad, but not something that necessarily needed to happen either.
Again, just like Adam Pearce, I think both he and Rave and Pearce are not, like, suited to squashes because they're more heels that are more, like, not always cowardly, but sometimes cowardly, but their act is more about, being sneaky and devious, and so having the matches where you're kind of meant to be, like, the dominant, really brutal, impressive, definitive wins, like both guys did still Pearce and his squash even did the old bail out of the ring because this kid's too much, and Rave does the begging off because it's just that's their act, even if it's not always suited to like a squash match. But we return backstage at this point for a Colt Cabana promo. He calls Homicide a thug for leaving him in a pool of his own blood at the previous show. Homicide tried to cut his tongue out, Colt reminds us. Colt says he took Homicide all wrong. But what did Homicide take Colt for? What did everyone take him for? The silly white guy? The weaker man? Colt says a thug preys on the weak, and he admits he grew up in a big white house with a white picket fence and parents that loved him and still love each other. They're not divorced or anything like that. They sent him to great schools. They sent him to college. He was one of the jocks with all-American friends. One of his friends is a big wig at the Chicago Tribune. Another plays in the NFL. Another is at the Merc, I believe he said. Colt's parents told him he could be anything he wanted to be in life. He could be a doctor. He could be a lawyer. He could be an architect. His brother is a director in Los Angeles. Colt says he could have been anything he wanted, but he's a fighter. He's in the scummiest business there is. He's in a carnival, a sideshow, a freak show. Colt is a fighter. He was born with it. He says Homicide had to become a fighter because he was looking for his next meal. Colt fights because he was made for it, not because he has to do it. Colt says he was just joking, but when Homicide tried to cut his tongue, that gave him a reason for fighting. He says tonight he wrestles Homicide, no disqualification, and says cavemen used to fight for women. Olympians fought for medals. Professionals fight for money. Colt isn't fighting for his life. He's fighting for Homicides. Matt, I actually, on the last show, we covered like one of the first serious Colt promos, and I talked about how I thought, that was a very angry, screamy promo, and very intense. And I said on that one, I believe that like Colt's angry promos kind of go over back and forth over the line to me of good or not good. Like sometimes it's a little over the top, and sometimes it's on the right side of over the top. I love this promo. I thought this was completely different. He gets a little angry at one point, but it's a completely different tone. It's much more measured, and this promo has real meat on its bones. Like what I love is he does the classic promo thing of he incorporates his real life into the promo, and it's the other great thing of he takes what would be perceived as a negative and turns it into a positive. It's a really interesting thing to take, the idea of like, yeah, my life was cushier than yours, but you know what? That makes me tougher because you were forced into becoming tough. You were forced into this life. I'm doing all this when I could have done anything. I could have done a lot of easier things. I do all this stuff because I really love doing it, because I'm meant to do it. You just had to do it. So in a sense, I'm the tougher guy than you. And I thought that was a really interesting way of giving himself some credibility and turning his negatives into a positive. And a lot of his promos, I don't remember. I didn't remember this promo. My bad memory makes part of the fun of the show is like rediscovering a lot of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this feud, this is still like my favorite Colt Cabana serious promo.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's one of the best promos he ever did. I really like the angle of, like you said, just like, I'm privileged, but that just makes me crazier because I chose to be a fighter instead of some sort of cushier job. The only thing, and I definitely thought it was better than the promo the last month. I mean, he was like, it made sense that he was much more like kind of over the top and like panicky in that last promo because he had just had someone try to cut his tongue out. But this worked a lot better. The only negative thing about this promo was I don't totally think the last line made any sense. Like when he said, I'm not fighting for my life, I'm fighting for yours.
Yeah.
Like I don't really know what that's supposed to mean. But besides that, I thought this was excellent, logical, well delivered, and really helped get over his character in a good way that works for this feud. So yeah, it was one of the better promos we've seen, honestly, the whole year in ROH.
And I think there's not enough of this in wrestling today. I love any promo that makes a match about more than just who's better or we hate each other because you hit me once or something. Like obviously all wrestling feuds are about those things. Those are the core things. But I always think if you can make a feud that's also about one extra thing layered on top, that's great. And just in this promo, the idea of like, you can tell where Colt says like, what did you think of me? What did everyone think of me? You can tell like he's expressing this resentment of like, he realizes everyone thinks I'm just the goofy guy, that no one thinks I'm tough. And in a way, that's what this feud becomes. As much as revenge, this feud also becomes kind of like Colt Cabana needing to prove to everybody that he's tough, that he can be serious at times, and, almost in a way by the end, like earning kind of the Homicide seal of approval, despite the fact that Homicide also is a guy who is trying at times to basically murder him. But I love anytime a feud becomes about more than just the most basic elements, and this promo really helped that. So that brings us to the Ring of Honor World Title #1 Contendership 3-way dance. That's a mouthful. Christopher Daniels, escorted to the ring by Allison Danger, defeated AJ Styles and Matt Sydal in 14 minutes 43 seconds when he pinned Sydal after hitting the best moonsault ever. So Matt, this was a real rarity in Ring of Honor, which was a #1 contenders match where the winner gets a title shot later in the show. Ring of Honor did not do that very often. And, they didn't really hold much back here, I thought, for a match where the winner was got to go on. What'd you think about this match?
I thought it was pretty entertaining. Like, I thought that Sydal definitely impressed. I think it had some of the normal issues that you have with three-ways where it's like, two guys take turns while one guy just lays around. And I don't think there was a ton of drama to it, but I thought, it was very well executed. They did a lot of cool stuff, and I thought it was pretty well executed. And I appreciated, that they did do a lot with Seidel. I think this truly elevated him. For one thing, it just elevated him just by the fact that he was in there, because I don't know that totally it makes sense for him to have been in there for number one contenders, like given what he had been given the chance to do in ROH so far. I don't know if it really was logical that he would be up for a shot at the title,
and even Danielson just lost to Joe clean on the last show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But given that he was in it, I think they did a good job. They start out with AJ and Daniel sort of ignoring him because they obviously have this long-standing feud in ROH and TNA, and they, wanted to just fight each other, and they throw Seidel to the floor. But Seidel, he stands up to them, he drop kicks them both. The one thing I did notice, the announcers mentioned the Daisy Hayes turn, which is the first time you've heard it mentioned on this DVD. Aries and Strong didn't even mention it in their promo.
Yeah.
So it's doesn't seem to be a big focal point, obviously, because that's the thing that cost them the match at the end of the last show. You'd think that Seidel would probably have something to say about that, but they just sort of make it an afterthought here.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's
actually.
a bit of an oversight, but that notwithstanding, there's actually at one point a Fallen Angel Matt Seidel dueling chant, and I imagine AJ had to be like, "Hey, wait a minute," when that was going on. But
has there ever been a three-way dueling chant ever, where it was the three names, like AJ Styles, Matt Seidel, Fallen Angel? I don't think there has to.
There has to have been. Yeah. I would bet money on it. Yeah, I can't think of it, but I'm almost positive. I bet you there's been a four-way one. That's how much I would say it. Now the question is, when one of those ladder matches that has 8 guys in it, have they ever had an 8-person dueling chant? Because if not, we're going to start it.
What I want now is a Survivor Series match where it's just a 10 chant, and the fans having to keep track of what order they started in. Okay, who are we back around to yet? Is it Kofi Kingston? Is it Big E? I don't know. I desperately want that now.
Yes, that's right. But I don't know if that makes sense with a dueling chant, because you're not going to duel somebody on one team with the person on their I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, you're right. That'd be weird. Well, why are you pitting us against each other?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've gotten that out of the way with the dueling chant logic. But as far as some of the cool spots, there's some relatively boilerplate stuff early on, but then there's some spots Seidel whips Daniels into AJ, goes for an inverted DDT, but AJ takes that opportunity to do his moonsault inverted DDT onto Seidel, which causes Seidel to DDT Daniels. And that's the sort of wacky, contrived fun I enjoy in these kinds of matches, as long as it's well executed. And that was definitely well executed, so I'm okay with it. At one point, AJ hits this crazy-looking DDT on Seidel with this real snap, and Seidel takes a really great bump. Which I think the execution of that sort of stuff I think enhances the match a lot. If they're going to do that stuff, you want the execution to be there, and that's the thing that I noticed throughout the match. Anything they tried, they did it well. At one point, AJ goes for a top rope Styles clash, but Daniel stops it. And he flips Seidel off of AJ, but Seidel hits Daniels with the Here It Is driver. And then AJ comes off the top, but Seidel catches him with a drop kick, so all 3 guys are down. Then there's another cool spot where AJ, he chucks Seidel up, who drops down on Daniels' shoulders. So Daniels hits him with a Death Valley driver. They keep going. They hit their signature spots. AJ stops Daniels from doing the BME and hits a rack bomb. Then AJ does a dive onto Daniels, and Seidel follows that up with a big top rope twisting body press onto both guys on the floor. But for some reason, and this is one of the illogical things, for some reason after Seidel hits that onto both guys, Styles is the one that gets the 2 count, right after that. I don't know what, I don't know if they just forgot, but Seidel gets a crucifix, and Styles tries to turn that into a Styles clash, but Seidel hits that big snapping Rana and gets a 2 count after Daniels breaks up the pin. And at that point, some of the pinfalls are getting pretty big pops. Daniels goes for the Angel's Wings, and Seidel charges, so Daniels backdrops him to the floor, and Daniels blocks another Here It Is driver, hits the Uranagi, hits the BME, gets the win. Like I said, some contrived stuff, some 3-way tropes, but just well executed, And I think Seidel looked really, really good, which I think is probably the best outcome you can get for a match like this.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I thought this was good, but nothing special. Like, I feel like do you want to see these three talented guys hit most of their signature spots with zero downtime? Then, like, this is the match for you. Do you want to see, like, literally almost anything else? This isn't the match for you. It is mostly that. It makes use, I would say, of, like, one of the biggest advantages of a three-way, which is you can really go at a fast pace because one guy can always take a breather. So it was just like move, good pace. And, these guys they didn't do many really innovative or unique, like double or triple team things. You kind of mentioned the cooler ones, like the AJ throwing Seidel in the air and Daniels catching the DVD and like those kind of spots you've mentioned. But most of the stuff in this match is just their standard offense, but done very quickly with no downtime. And, a lot of their offense is really cool, like that Seidel twisting body press to the floor. I mean, it looked like it just killed Daniels, and it's always beautiful. So that stuff was fun. But, definitely it is not on the par with the great three-ways we've seen in Ring of Honor, or even the great three-ways in TNA. Like, think about what a hard position this match would be in at the time, where this was very shortly after the 5-star, widely considered to be one of the greatest three-ways of all time, Styles, Daniels, Samoa Joe three-way, the first one in TNA. And think about, like, the pressure of, you're just on a random undercard match in Ring of Honor, but it's 2/3 of that match with Seidel in the place of Joe. So probably some people were, like, hoping it was going to be another like absolute, show stealer, which it is an enjoyable match. It's definitely nothing close to that. And you were completely right too about it having some of the three-way tropes. Like, I feel like the three-way trope it really had this match is guy having to sell on the floor for way longer than appropriate because it's not his turn to come back in the ring and do his next spot yet. And Seidel, you see it a couple times. Like one spot, Daniel stops a run of Seidel offense just with a simple boot to the gut and a forearm, and then he throws him to the floor, and Seidel, like, even tries to skin the cat, and then he just calmly drops to the floor, and he proceeds to spend, like, I counted, like, the next 40-plus seconds on the floor, which in a match like this, that's this fast-paced, isn't like an eternity, and he's just watching what's going on, and he even, like, misses a near fall. And again, he's selling it from a boot to the stomach and just a forearm to the face. And then later, there's a sequence where, Daniels and Styles are doing moves to each other late in the match, and Seidel is just standing. If you watch, it's like later in the match, Seidel is just watching the match on the floor, calm as can be, multiple times turning to talk to fans in the front row. Like, just calmly, like, yeah, you said that, huh? Yeah, what's up? And then during a near fall between Daniels and AJ, I don't know which was pinning who, Seidel then, like, lunges to the ring and he does the old, I'm too hurt to get in the ring. And I was just talking to the TV. I was like, dude, you were talking to fans for, like, the last 30 seconds. Like, and now you're acting like, oh, I'm so hurt. And I thought it's just one of those weird little three-way moments where you just kind of have to kill time on the outside and then all of a sudden act like you've been in complete agony all this time. And it was one of those weird things. But, other funny thing was there was a moment where Styles hits Daniels with a knee drop, and Seidel's about to hit Daniels with like a big springboard move, but after taking the knee drop, Daniels just rolls to the corner of the ring, and Seidel clearly was not ready for that, so he's just like stops, like, okay, like, it's funny if you watch Seidel, he just kind of like drops to the floor. It's like, yeah, I guess that's not going to happen, and I just kind of felt bad for him. Also in this match, I guess my last note was Seidel somehow found a way to take a bump on his head and neck after taking a standard backbreaker. Like, he takes a regular backbreaker and he just lands in such a way where he almost takes like a head and neck bump from it. It was such a crazy thing. And yeah, after that, after the match, Daniels makes a belt-wearing motion around his waist. He's coming for the title tonight. And he tells the camera that he is one match away from his destiny. He leaves. AJ shakes Matt Seidel's hand and leaves. And this leaves Seidel all alone in the ring, which gets a nice Matt Seidel chant from the crowd. And I thought that was another way you mentioned how this match you felt kind of elevated Seidel. I thought that was a way this match also elevated Seidel. Is sometimes Ring of Honor tries to do the camera lingers on the guy for a long time and gets the chant, and it doesn't really feel like it does anything. And sometimes it just feels like, honestly, like they're showing it just because they had time on the DVD. But this time it did kind of feel, for some reason, significant to me. Like, It's like, oh, he's getting a bit of a rub.
It was genuine, like, and that makes a difference. It didn't feel forced.
So next we join Claudio Castagnoli backstage. He wrestles Milano Collection AT tonight, but he says he can't get Nigel McGuinness out of his head. He says Nigel made him bleed for the first time in his career recently. Nigel screwed him out of the Pure title. Claudio asked Jim Cornette for another shot at the Pure Championship. He's basically begging for a shot. He says he just needs one more shot at Nigel. That's it. He'll get it done. Then we go back to the ring. Gary Michael Capetta tells us that Bryan Danielson has requested a few minutes of time. Out comes Bryan back in Long Island for the first time since he won the Ring of Honor World title there at the last Long Island show. Bryan does an over-the-top clearing of his throat where he keeps going, and he's done this, I think, once before, and he starts cracking himself up. Like
he does it for a long time this time.
Yeah. He says the three-way we just saw was an awesome match, and he points out that the winner, Christopher Daniels, faces him for the title later tonight as a result. We get a big Fallen Angel chant from that. That eventually starts turning to a dueling chant for Bryan and Fallen Angel. And Bryan starts doing the throat clearing thing again, but he starts doing in sync with the Fallen Angel part of the dueling chant to try and cover it up. So you're hearing like, Bryan, Daniel, or whatever, and then every time
let's go Dragon.
Yeah, let's go Dragon, and then and again, like Bryan's starting to like make himself laugh, and he's just such a cornball. And I was just like, I love this goof so much. And Bryan says he's out here because he doesn't think it's fair for Daniels to have to go through a tough match and face a fresh Bryan Danielson later in the night. So Bryan himself has procured a very tough match, and out comes Asriel. And that brings us to a non-title match, Bryan Danielson versus Asriel. But first, here's a weird thing, Matt. The notes on Cage Match say that before he faced Asriel, he faced Pele Primo. I, again, do not know if that's Cage Match being weird or if they actually edited out, like, maybe he wrestled 2 matches on this show.
You know what? That does ring a bell to me, that they might have even posted a clip of that on ROHWrestling.com. I don't remember for sure, but it sounds familiar.
If so, it's completely edited out of the DVD.
Right.
We just get the non-title match, Bryan Danielson defeating Asriel via submission in 5 minutes, 55 seconds, when he made him tap out to the cat mutilation. I would say this match is a rarity, both for Danielson and Ring of Honor. For Danielson especially, like, this is a match he's probably rarely had, not just in Ring of Honor, but in his career, which is not just a squash where he's doing the squashing, but a squash where he's actually making the other guy, like, look like a joke. Like, he's not just dominating him, he's really making this guy look like he's nothing, like laughing at him, literally laughing at him. I've mentioned this before, but Ring of Honor and most, like, work rate indies, they rarely had a match like this because the biggest things indies could offer, it's not money, it's not, like, huge, celebrity, it's just opportunity. So you would find that most indie matches in the big indies are like 50-50, pretty even in losing. The idea is everyone gets a chance to show what they can do, even if they don't get to win. So you rarely saw a match like this where a guy doesn't just get dominated, but like I would say comes out of it looking weaker than when he came into the match. Like everything about this is like Asriel's a joke to Danielson. He puts Asriel in submissions and he lets Asriel put him in submissions, and he laughs about how they do nothing to him. Like Asriel puts Danielson in an arm wringer, and Danielson just maneuvers his hand into like a talking duck mouth, and like has a talk in Asriel's face. Later he lets Asriel put him in a sleeper hold, and Danielson's like just laughing while he's in the sleeper hold, and he fakes going out. And it's not just that Danielson's making Asriel look like a joke. Like, Asriel's doing just as much to make himself look like a joke. Like, when he has Danielson in the sleeper hold and Danielson's making him pretending to go to sleep, like, the crowd's laughing. They're all in the joke. And Asriel's, like, thinking he's about to beat Bryan Danielson in 3 minutes with a sleeper hold. Like, he's like, yes, yes. And later on, like, Asriel's chopping Danielson. And Asriel is going out of his way to, like, sell that, like, his hand is really getting hurt, like going, ow, just from chopping Bryan Danielson's chest. And here's the thing, this was like fun to watch. It was refreshingly different. You don't see this kind of match often in Ring of Honor. Danielson's just got so much personality at this point in his career. It was a lot of fun to see him just kind of dominate a guy like that. But it is a weird match to watch. And I will also say, like, I felt kind of bad for Asriel. Not that his career was really going anywhere at Ring of Honor at this point, but this is the kind of match I feel like if you work this match in Ring of Honor or in a lot of companies, you kind of know you're on the way out, right? Like, any chance of you getting a push is kind of over at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. Yeah, like it was an entertaining squash. I totally agree with what you said. Like it's definitely out of character for Bryan Danielson, for the promotion. You don't think of too many matches like this ever in ROH. It's sort of a WWE kind of thing to do, where they just kind of humiliate somebody. But yeah, it was certainly entertaining. The announcers are fairly dismissive of Asriel right off the bat, except at the very beginning they call him, quote, a fine young athlete who's making his way up the ranks here. And I'm like, you're right about the fine young athlete part. But at this point, was he making his way up the ranks? I think it was pretty clear he was making his way down the ranks at this point in ROH, even before this match. Other than what you said, some things that stood out were Allison Danger was on commentary, which I always enjoy. She didn't get a chance to do much, but she did get to, cut a little promo on Danielson. We haven't heard too much from her during this run, so I appreciated that. Also, Lenny Leonard on this show during this match and in the main event, he really, really leans into treating Danielson like a heel. Like, because, there's some times where it's a little bit like, as we continue to go on with this reign, that he's almost like tweenerish. Mm-hmm. But, like, at this point, he's like a heel. Like Leonard is like, this guy is disgusting. He's insufferable. What a jerk. And you don't really get a ton of that throughout the reign. But at this point, they've decided they're going to make Danielson out to be a real asshole and not like it. And so Leonard really makes that clear here. Otherwise, I pretty much agree with everything you said.
Yeah, the other highlight, I think, was Danielson at one point twists Asriel's arm at a really disgusting angle. And I have to assume that the Allison Danger thing, like like Bat said, she does like a run-in on commentary and basically talks about, like how Daniels is going to beat Danielson and that stuff. I have to assume that was probably because
Shimmer, right?
Yeah, Prazak and Danger, I assume, were probably recording the commentary for the first two Shimmer DVDs, I imagine, probably at this same time. So she was probably right there to able to just like, hey, do you want to like just sit down for a minute and record some commentary here? It's sort of like that time. Remember there was that one show where like Samoa Joe all of a sudden like just dropped in on commentary for like a minute. Like I have to assume that was the kind of thing where if anyone was around the Ring of Honor like area, like the Florida recording with, Sal and them, and like it was probably just like, hey, if you're already here, do you want to just sit in for a couple minutes? So it was funny also that you mentioned you focus, which you're right, the Lenny Leonard stuff really focusing on Danielson being heel, because Dave Meltzer at this point was talking about how much of a tweener Danielson was at this point, which he would end up being. Dave wrote in The Observer, because of Danielson having to work once, Danielson, who was playing the role of a 70s Dory Funk-style heel world champion, basically, even though a heel, he works the whole match as a wrestler doing only very subtle things as the match goes along. So the local babyface is the babyface, but the champion isn't an overt heel.
I wouldn't say he was so subtle. Like he didn't like totally cheat. Like he wasn't like choking somebody out with like a shoelace or anything, but like he was mean to the crowd during his matches. And he would occasionally
like poke eyes and gouge eyes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But Daniel, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going through the Dave's note. And then Dave just says the thing that we've reported a lot because Danielson was known to do this, but he mentioned it again here, which is another strong point of Danielson is that he watches the entire show. So he figures in what the crowd is reacting to, as well as making sure not to duplicate spots already done, and then calls everything in the ring based on crowd feel, which obviously that was one of the many things that makes Danielson great. But yeah, I would say like, I kind of had this in my notes for the main event with Danielson, but like, I mean, Danielson's a heel, but the thing I always say about this Danielson, what made him a tweener was, and I might have said this before, but very few people, in my opinion, could have made this character a tweener, because most wrestlers, if they're constantly saying they're the best in the world and they're being so arrogant, you would just call them a complete heel. But Danielson made it a tweener just because he was legit so good that when he says, I'm the best in the world, you're like, well, he's being an asshole about it, but, he might be right. And to me, that's the difference between a guy being a heel with this gimmick and a guy being tweener, is he's one of the only guys that could actually back up those boasts. And also, I think another thing this really comes through in the main event where he faces Daniels, is like, Danielson is much like CM Punk when he did the heel turn on the Summer of Punk storyline. Like, Danielson is just having such a blast, clearly, like, doing this stuff that, like, it's infectious, and it's hard, I think, to completely hate a guy when he is just clearly having so much fun being an asshole.
Yeah, and I think also just the crowds are so conditioned to appreciate skill, and no one had more of it than Bryan Danielson, so how much are you really going to hate on him?
Yeah, definitely. And that brings us to the no disqualification match, Homicide, with Grim Reaper and Judas Smoke. So, of course, as always, Ring of Honor announcers would never acknowledge that the Grim Reaper was anything but, quote, one of Homicide's thugs. Defeated Colt Cabana by a ref stoppage in 19 minutes, 33 seconds, when Homicide makes Cabana pass out by choking him with a coat hanger. Matt, this is the first match of the Colt Homicide feud where we actually get a finish and really like a full match that is not just an extended crowd brawl, although we certainly get brawling and the big stunt bumps that this feud's had so far. What'd you think about this as a match? Like nearly 20 minutes here.
Yeah, this was actually only the second official match of the feud, even though it had started, months earlier, and like I think 9 shows prior to this it started, and now we're only getting our second official match between the two. Kind of crazy. But yeah, so there was a moment late in the match that it kind of slowed down while they were setting something up, which I'll get to. But like besides that, I was very impressed with this match. I thought they did a really good job, and I thought it got over. I'll go through it. Like I'll go through some of the stuff and what I liked and what I didn't like, but I thought this was a very good no disqualification match. So to start, Julius Smokes and Grim Reaper are accompanying Homicide. As usual, they do not say what Grim Reaper's name is. He's just a thug. But it's funny, so that they start the match with Cabana being aggressive, and they do a lot of punches. One funny thing though is the very first non-punch move by Cabana is him just whipping Homicide from corner to corner, back and forth, like the Big Boss Man did to Akeem at WrestleMania 6, which is just kind of funny to have in this kind of a no disqualification match. But after too long, Cabana does take out his own fork. I don't know what you'd call his version of the ghetto fork, like the suburbs fork. In the
salad
suburbs,
fork.
Yeah, I was going to say in the suburbs they have forks for all their different courses. So he clips out his salad fork, and before he can hit it, Grim Reaper comes in with a missile dropkick, but Cabana takes him out quickly, and he tries to fork Homicide, and we get Homicide fighting tooth and nail to block it, and Cabana's doing a good job of seeming extra aggressive. He's ripping and tearing at Homicide's face. Homicide hits the tope con hilo early, and Cabana just pounds on him around ringside. Meanwhile, Smokes is behind him, taunting him with the bat. And I'm just it's a no disqualification match. Why don't you just hit him with it? It seems weird that he's just teasing it. Because, in matches that aren't no disqualification, he hits people with stuff.
Did you notice before the match started when Smokes is carrying the bat and he walks by the cameraman, the bat actually hits the camera?
I did not notice that, but, not surprising. I'm sure he's not super careful with the bat. But, there's a lot of Cabana fighting on the outsides, hitting Reefer, knocking down Smokes, just that kind of stuff. But then Homicide, while Cabana's distracted by those two guys, he takes that opportunity to get the advantage, chokes Cabana with the bat, which to me is not the most effective use of a bat as a weapon, right? If you have a bat and you're going to attack someone with it, probably the first thing you do with it is not going to be the choke. Right, you're probably going to go for the hit with it,
and
swing and hit with it.
Later, when Colt tries to gouge Homicide's eye out with a pipe, it's Colt. Do you know you just talked about how tough you are? Do you know how weapons work, my friend?
Yeah, exactly. But they keep fighting. Colt props a chair in the middle between the middle and top turnbuckles, but Homicide sends Colt head first into that, then throws him out to be beaten up by Reefer and Smokes some more. Cabana gets his arm wrapped in a chair, and Homicide drop kicks the chair, then attacks the arm, and then he hits the chair into Cabana's head, causing Cabana to blade, and now Homicide starts forking Cabana. And I would say this is Cabana's best blade job yet. It's still not it's certainly not a CM Punk blade job, but it's better than other Cabana blade jobs we've seen, I think. Then we get some fighting spirit by Cabana, like Homicide's punching him in the head, and Cabana's yelling, "Come on!" But instead of doing that, Homicide just kicks him in the nuts. Then Cabana hits him with a chair while he's on the top rope, goes for a superplex right onto the chair, and I thought that was very well positioned, because sometimes you do a superplex onto like a chair in the ring, and you kind of barely graze it, but this was like right flush in the center of it. They do this thing where they hit lariats with each other, but they only get 1 counts, and they both stand up and they scream and they fight through it, and Cabana hits his lariat, Homicide does the same, then they take each other down with a double clothesline. I thought that was a really good spot. The crowd was really into it. Cabana blocks a cop killer, Homicide blocks a Colt 45, Cabana blocks an Ace Crusher and hits an air raid crash for 2. And then he brings out the pipe, and like you said, he starts digging it into Homicide's face and his eye, and it's like, just hit him with the pipe, man. If that's what you're going to do. Smokes interferes some more here and allows Homicide to escape to the outside, and then Cabana does a dive onto him. And at this whole point, the match was like going at a really good pace. It was really exciting. Things really stall here because Cabana takes a bunch of time to set up a table, and he hits Homicide with a chair into it. And he goes up to the top, but Reefer holds his leg, and that allows Homicide to come up to the top, and they fight for a while and block a series of moves. And finally, after like they tease power bombs and ace crushers, Homicide does hit the ace crusher off the top through the table, and it comes off pretty well. I would say not as well as when Homicide did it to Trent Acid, when it was just out of nowhere and insane and like halfway across the aisleway, but it was pretty good. So they're both down. Reefer and Smokes throw Homicide back in to cover, but Cabana kicks out, which actually even surprised me, because I had forgotten what the finish was, and oh boy, was there a finish. Because Homicide pulls out a coat hanger, and as we've noticed, there have been like escalating atrocities committed by Homicide. We did the try to cut out his tongue on the last show. This is almost like Homicide is trying to commit a homicide, and in fact, Lenny Leonard does his best Gabe on commentary impression here.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say?
That's what I wrote in my notes, that he is basically being Gabe in this point.
He's just going and saying, he's trying to kill him, he's trying to commit a murder. And the funniest part of this whole thing, which, I don't know, maybe took the match down a little bit for me, but I thought it was so funny that it didn't matter. So Homicide, yes, I guess, is trying to kill him and commit a murder by strangling him with a coat hanger. But as that's going on and Lenny Leonard is screaming passionately to save Colt Cabana's life, the ref is just in the ring treating it like a submission hold. Yeah. He's just like, yo, come on, Colt, what do you say? What do you say, Colt? and he lifts his arm 3 times and he lifts his arm and calls the match for Homicide. And it's just like, there's just such a incongruity between what the announcers are acting like, what Cabana is acting like, and what the ref is doing, that I thought it was extremely funny. And eventually, the crowd chants for Homicide, which is kind of funny, as more refs come in and very timidly ask Homicide to stop trying to murder Cabana. Finally, Homicide gets off, and they pull Cabana out of the ring as Leonard is still completely apoplectic. But overall, I thought the match was other than that, I thought the match was really very good. And I thought it put a lot of heat on the feud. If they're going to do the crazy stuff with Homicide trying to kill Cabana, I thought they did it pretty effectively. But yeah, there was some stuff that was inconsistent, and I did think the match slowed down a little bit more than I would have liked to set up the table, but I was a fan of this. I thought this was very good.
I was also a fan, very good for me too. I would put this, if I had to do a star rating, 3 3/4 stars, right under 4. I think I've talked about this before, but brawls have, I think this match did the thing I like, which is it walked a really fine line that brawls sometimes have to walk, which is you can make it really intense just by having a lot of blood and choking and brawling at ringside, but that gets very monotonous and boring. Or you can make it more exciting by incorporating more wrestling moves into it. But if you do too much of that, it starts to become too much like a wrestling match and doesn't feel as hate-filled and as much like a feud. It feels too much like any other wrestling match. And I felt like these guys did a really good job on this match of having that middle ground. On the recent shows we've seen, it's just been these 10-minute brawls with a ton of chair throwing, in the crowd punching, and then one big stunt spot at the end. And you get you get the chairs, you get the stunt spot, you get the brawling here, but you also get a bunch of wrestling stuff too. But it still feels like a feud. It still feels like something more violent and gritty. But you do get wrestling stuff. You do get moves. You do get like a very pro wrestling style sequence where they're like each hitting like you mentioned, the lariat and then kicking out at one. You get the sequence where they're trying each to go for their finishers, like the Colt 45 and the cop killer, but like getting out of it. All that stuff is in here, but you also get, blood, you get weapons. I'm on record as not liking the Ace Crusher spot through the table because of every time Homicide does it, to do it safely, he basically has to take the entire bump himself through the table. But I am also on record as realizing that I am in the complete minority in that, and that, like, including on this show, the crowd always goes nuts for it. So I am, that's something that's clearly a minority opinion. I, like you, had forgotten that wasn't the finish. I was surprised by the coat hanger. Another thing I thought this match did a really good job towing the line on was, with no DQs, I feel it's tough to have no DQs where you're a heel and you have an entourage, because, like, why wouldn't the heels just interfere constantly right from the start of the match? And I felt like this match did a good job of Smokes and Reefer interfered throughout the match, but was kind of sprinkled throughout the match. And more often than not, Colt would be able to successfully fight them off. So it felt like they were trying to interfere and occasionally got their licks in, but, like, for the most part, Colt fought them off. And there was even a couple times in this match where, like, after Colt, like, hits a move on Homicide and gets him down, rather than immediately follow up, you can see, like, Colt looking at ringside to, like, where's Reefer, where's Smokes, to kind of be on guard. And I like that as, like, a little touch. I thought they did, like, the right amount of interference in this match. And the coat hanger thing, like, yet another, we were just talking on the last show, how many weird weapon spots is Ring of Honor going to do in a 1 year period between the cheese grater to the stomach, the plastic bag suffocation, the scissors to the tongue, the coat hanger. We're going to get the Trano spot. There have been so many different weird, like, life or death weapon spots in a year. And I feel like you can do one angle like that once every 2 years, and it can come off as, like, a deadly serious angle that has, like, impact. I feel like Ring of Honor in this time frame has gone to this well so often that it just, especially when Lenny is doing the Gabe oversell, it's so hard to take seriously, and they've just done it too many times. And it was also funny because, man, I don't know about you, but I was like, how lethal is a coat hanger choke? Like, I started looking at after this match, I looked at my closet, I was like, should I just take a coat hanger and, like, wrap it around my throat and see, like, how it feels? And I thought, no Trevor.
No.
Yes, I felt like this is how I trip and fall, and people think, like, I died in some weird autoerotic asphyxiation accident. So I was like, no, Trevor, that's not a good idea.
That is definitely what I would think.
Yeah. So I was like, do not do that, Trevor. But I honestly don't know. Like, I guess it would bite into your neck, worse, and potentially, but
you're being choked with, like, metal. Just don't do it.
But very thin, flexible, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe other people have better coat hangers than I do. It's very cheap, flexible stuff. And, Lenny's going nuts. He drops an F-bomb, which is the commentary in Ring of Honor almost never does, where he's just like, somebody, fucking, they're trying to sell this like he is almost dead. But a couple other notes, just quickly looking at things I wrote about, Matt. This is the kind of thing where, speaking of me being afraid of telling what would happen if I died and how people would think of me, I was, like, at one point being like, I hope I don't die right after writing this sentence with my notes app open, because this is something I wrote in my notes, Matt. This is the kind of stuff I do for the podcast. This is a note verbatim I wrote. Does Julia Smokes scream, quote, I like the taste of shit, unquote, or I'd like to taste that shit, as homicide attacks on bloody Colt Cabana? And I'm pretty sure he said, I'd like to taste that shit, but I rewrote it 3 times. I thought, am I going crazy? Did Julia Smokes just say, I like the taste of shit?
Well, if he's ever seen the first episode of Nathan For You, there's a good option for him in that case. In case anyone hasn't seen that, the whole premise was that he created a poo-flavored frozen yogurt.
He'd be the one customer for Nathan Fielder.
There were a bunch of people that got it on that episode.
Oh yeah. But yeah, like I was like, I better not die right after writing that. I don't want that to be the last thing I've ever written or thought of in my life. I thought.
Yeah. You said it, not me.
Homicide, we should also mention, wore an Eddie Guerrero t-shirt during this match, and that leads into a note that the cameras did not pick this up, or if they did, they edited it out of the DVD release, but Dave Meltzer wrote, Homicide worked in an Eddie Guerrero t-shirt. Crowd was chanting for Guerrero. Crowd got mad when Julius Smokes made a gesture like he was smoking a joint and pointed to the shirt. Yeah, probably not the classiest of moves, even when it was a heel that did it. Like, I don't think that's a classy move. Also, what's that even mean? Like, I'm smoking a joint and pointing to Eddie Guerrero. Like, I mean, I don't even know if that's offensive so much as confusing. Like, hey, smoke weed every day, Eddie Guerrero.
Maybe we're just not privy to this. It might just be us who are out of touch. Out of touch with 2005.
Homicide then continues to choke Cabana with the hanger after the match as Lenny freaks the fuck out. The refs and the Ring of Honor students try and stop Homicide, but Reefer and Smokes hold many of them away. Eventually, Homicide just lets go of it on his own, and Colt is carried backstage by some refs. Then it's intermission time, and Gary Michael Capetta is backstage. He's joined by Allison Danger and Christopher Daniels. Gary first informs us that Cabana and Homicide are being medically attended to. Christopher Daniels then says that just because he doesn't hate Bryan Danielson like he hated CM Punk, and just because they don't have the same heated rivalry that he and Samoa Joe has, doesn't mean that Danielson's title doesn't make him a target. Daniels says that he's been preparing for this opportunity since the beginning of Ring of Honor, and all Danielson can do is say his prayers. So, pretty standard promo just to establish that, hey, title match coming up tonight.
I actually liked the promo more than usual. I don't know why. I thought he cut a pretty good promo. Like it was like, and I think it put more heat and emphasis on the match than it would otherwise have, since it is in some ways a cold match. Got me more into the match. So in that sense, it worked. I don't know. I think Daniels in the ring on this ROH run has not been as good as he had been previously, but I think his promos have been pretty good overall.
Yeah. I mean, he's always been a good promo guy. I feel like maybe I appreciate a little bit less now because we've seen, like in the early days of Ring of Honor, I felt like I was really shocked, like at how much he stood out versus my memories, just because there were so many guys that could not cut promos back then. I feel like there's a few more guys we've seen now in Ring of Honor that can cut promos, so it's not quite as special. But yeah, he's always been reliably like just one of the best guys. And obviously Gabe, especially early on, you watch those early shows, he really leans on, Daniels and also Carino are guys where it feels like whether or not they even had anything to say on a show, Gabe was making sure they got mic time because it was just like, these are some of the only guys that I can count on to reliably like cut a solid promo every time out. But
yeah, totally.
We then get a clip of Eddie Guerrero from A Night of Appreciation as a downbeat Gabe Sapolsky voiceover tells us that, well, basically he credits Eddie for being the draw of the first Ring of Honor show, working, super crazy, and he also credits him for working the third show. Even after he had already re-signed with WWE and was the Intercontinental Champion, he honored his obligation, which, if you look at wrestling history, there have been plenty of wrestlers that after they sign with WWE or any major, they completely renege all of their indie dates, and Eddie Guerrero did not do that for Ring of Honor. He followed up and did it anyway. And it was just a nice, quick, genuine sounding video of, tell Gabe was, sad and putting over the contributions Eddie had to wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, this is as tasteful as you're going to get from a wrestling company as far as, they didn't belabor it. They said what they needed to say, and, Gabe did a good job. He sounded earnest, and I'm sure he was, and I'm sure he really did appreciate Eddie. And then at the very end, which, you'll mention, but I'll mention it now, it's just the very end of the DVD is just a clip from this very same show, Night of Appreciation, with the crowd saying, "We will miss you," chanting, "We will miss you." Yeah. And it's like totally tasteful, which is very rare for wrestling. And, you contrast that with what WWE did with, making it an angle very quickly, bringing out the car and having, Randy Orton attack Rey Mysterio on it, saying Eddie's in hell, all that
Yeah.
stuff. And it's
Oh,
just
God.
like, I mean, it was gross at the time. It seems even grosser now. It's just like, it just shows, how callous WWE was, and how Ring of Honor, for all its flaws, was not like that. They were just like, treated it like normal people would, and just were like, hey, we appreciate this guy. He did a lot for us. He was great. Thank you. Which is all you need to do. All you need to do.
And how sad is that? Like, not that this wasn't. I thought this was very tasteful. I thought they did not oversell. They did the right amount. A little at the start with the 10-bell salute, this little thing in the middle, and a little thing at the end. I felt, Gabe, he had some words, and they all seemed genuine, and also like he wasn't making up or going too crazy. Like he said, like Eddie was an influence to the Ring of Honor style and a lot of the wrestlers on the roster, which is probably undoubtedly true. And but it's sad though that like you were sounding almost grateful, and I was the same way. Like it's like we shouldn't be. It's sad that in the world of wrestling we're almost surprised and grateful just for people like you said the right word, just being like normal human beings, like doing the base level like appropriate response.
Yeah, I mean,
and not making us feel gross.
I think Vince McMahon has just warped it for everybody. I'd like to think that it's not just like everyone in wrestling. I think it's like, I know it's not just him, but I want to think that it's at least just like mainly him.
Yeah. I mean, this should be the standard, like just the expected base level of how you react, where you're not making the entire show. I mean, unless it's like a tribute show in the way like Brody Lee show, or some of the WWE has done some good tribute shows where it's a lot of fond memories and stuff. But like, there are definitely been shows in wrestling history where people have taken advantage of a wrestler's death and kind of used it almost as a selling point. This show does not do that, but it also does, I think, do enough to pay tributes more than just a token gesture. And, that should be like the base level expectation for how wrestling or anything treats a death. But yeah, like you said, Vince McMahon sometimes has kind of warped our expectations. But that brings us to Milano Collection AT defeated Claudio Castagnoli via submission in 12 minutes, 48 seconds when he made him tap out to the AT lock. This was a little bit above average as a match, but I thought something was missing. We talked on the last show about how 2005 Ring of Honor had a lot of undercard matches that felt like lesser held back versions of the matches these guys would have in the main event rather than like being kind of their own thing. And I felt like this was a little bit like that here. This felt like there was nothing really binding this match together. It was just like two guys trading moves, nothing for 12 minutes, nothing more, nothing less, and they have cool moves, but it didn't feel like they were really intense. There obviously isn't any story to this match. It just felt kind of like there was nothing, again, holding it together. But, I thought in particular Milano Collection AT really looked good here. As always with him, I'm noticing that like it's his execution that I like, as much as he has a lot of really cool, unique offense, but it's just his execution is really polished. Like he does a running drop kick where he starts at the entrance and he runs all the way to the ring apron where Claudio is hung up on the ropes, and he lands a drop kick to Claudio, and then he jumps so high that he is able to land on the ring apron. And it's just the standard stuff too. Like I love how his back senton he does is like him flying through there in like a sitting up position, and then he does this really sudden, deep snap back to hit the senton, like this laying out. I really like stuff like that. I like how smooth and slow his twisting like moonsault off the second rope is. It's almost like Matt Sydal-esque and how much hang time and graceful it is. Like it's stuff like that where it's not just he does cool stuff, he does it in a cool way. It's just his execution is really good. But we've seen so many your move, my move matches in indie wrestling that the bar for them is really high, and this just is not, it's not bad, it's just not I've seen way better matches that are just about trading moves. But and also Claudio loses clean again right after on a show where he cut a promo begging basically for a rematch for a title, and then he loses clean here. Again, I realized they really liked Milano at this time, but it just kind of felt like an odd choice, I thought.
Isn't Milano only on 2 more shows after this?
We will get to it, but there is apparently a falling out between Milano and Ring of Honor. So I think they probably plan to have him longer because Milano ends up spending a year in the U.S. on excursion. But, I mean, we remember, like, I think after that first Milano match, there was a quote Gabe gave to one of the newsletters where he basically said, if we had Milano, like, long term, we would make him world champion. Like, that's how high they were on him initially.
So then it makes more sense why obviously he beat Claudio. Because obviously, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about what actually does happen. It's like, oh, Claudio's a big star for them for years, and he's really, Milano's out in a couple shows.
Yeah.
But, I agree with you on the match. I thought Milano did look good. I thought the match itself was fine, but had, like, no intensity really to it, no stakes. So I don't know how much Claudio, like non-ROH Claudio, you saw from like 04 and 05, like from Chikara or IWA or CZW. I have not seen a lot of his non-ROH stuff from that era. So, like, how good would you say Claudio was at this point? Because obviously he becomes fantastic, obviously, but like, how good would you say he was in November 2005?
I watched a fair bit of Claudio in Chikara and saw a little bit of him in other places. This was a time period of my life where I was actually watching quite a bit of Chikara too. And, Claudio was significantly better, I always felt like, in Chikara than Ring of Honor. In fact, he was, to me, one of the poster boys for, there have been occasionally guys in Ring of Honor history where for some reason they're good everywhere else, but they're not good in Ring of Honor. For some reason, they just don't click there. And Claudio, to me, was the poster boy. Now, on rewatch so far, I've enjoyed Claudio's early Ring of Honor matches more than I remembered. This match was more of what my memory of Claudio in Ring of Honor was, which was it's technically fine, but it's nothing special. And like, if I had only seen Claudio in performances like this, I'd go like, what's special about this guy? Like, yeah, he's big and he's a fairly good worker. But if you watch like Chikara, I don't know if it's just differences, but what all the differences are. But I think part of it too was Chikara, was more lucha influenced, and Claudio is really good as a base for undersized, like flippy lucha guys or high flyers. And he's really good at doing that stuff. And like, even here you see a little bit where he does like, tumbles in some of these matches and like jumps over guys that are tall. But I feel like so far in Ring of Honor, he's been matched up with a lot of the other bigger guys in Ring of Honor, like BJ Whitmer and Nigel McGuinness. And I actually feel like Claudio can have good matches with them, but Claudio's biggest strength, I think, is when you put him with small, like, flyers. I think that's when he really shines.
Yeah, I mean, like, but like, you agree, like, he does, even in ROH, becomes like excellent eventually.
Yeah, but even there, part of it, I think, is because it becomes more like his Chikara situation where he gets to start teaming with Chris Hero,
Yeah.
And doing the tag stuff. And so it becomes a bit more maybe it is just as simple as he needed to be framed in a certain position, or maybe he just gets more comfortable. But yeah, this was definitely kind of the Claudio I was remembering from Ring of Honor.
See, like, this is how I felt about a lot of the matches we've watched of him so far. Like, and I love him. Like, I think he's like just like such a super talented guy. But like, I'm just talking about in this particular era, not like him in general. At least for the stuff they had him doing, I don't think he was there yet. As far as like to really impress at the level that some guys do in ROH. So like, I think a lot of the matches we've watched so far have just been kind of dull and disappointing. And like I said, it will get better, but like, I thought this match was, fit into that category.
It's funny, there was a rumor, like, I think the Voices of Wrestling guy said on their podcast a couple times that like Tony Khan maybe isn't as big a fan of Johnny Gargano as you might think, and that maybe he's not that he's saying that either of these guys they still might come to AEW, but that also Tony Khan might not also be as big of a fan of Claudio, like just not that he hates these guys, but just not as like gotta have them as you might think. And we know that Tony was a big Ring of Honor fan to the point that he bought the company. Maybe he watched these kinds of matches and maybe he's got the wrong impression. I have
a very hard time believing that Tony Khan has not seen Claudio Castagnoli's WWE work.
Obviously, yeah.
Like, where he's like, clearly is
I'm being more glib than
wrestler.
Anything, but
yeah.
And we should also mention, they mentioned during commentary that Nigel McGuinness is not on this show because he's on a tour of Pro Wrestling Noah. So, and that I believe is true. So one of the rare shows of this era that Nigel is not on, actually. And that brings us to the Ring of Honor Tag Team Title #1 contendership match. Generation Next of Austin Aries and Roderick Strong defeat Jay Lethal and Samoa Joe in 17 minutes, 22 seconds when Aries pins Jay Lethal after hitting a frog splash. So we get, a tribute to Eddie Guerrero there. And it's kind of funny where this show was only less than a week after Eddie died, and there aren't too many tributes to like Eddie Guerrero in terms of moves. And I feel like all these years later, maybe kind of going to a point you were talking earlier about how all these years later people still pay tribute to Eddie Guerrero. I feel like when it gets around the anniversary of Eddie's death, there'll be shows where you'll see like episodes of Dynamite or something where like 3 matches will have like 3 amigos and frog slash spots. And this was a show like only a week later. And to me, this was like the only really noticeable spot I could think of that was like an Eddie tribute.
So are you saying that's good restraint or that they didn't do enough?
I'm not saying it's not good or bad. I'm just saying it's funny how maybe in a way that Eddie's like legend has almost grown. Like even just the idea of playing tribute to him has almost grown,
I think that's true.
But what did you think about the match? Because on paper, this looks like a great match. I don't want to tip my hand, but I mean, you got 4 really talented guys. It's Aries and Joe have this kind of fairly rich history at this point to play off of. There's something at stake here. It's the semi-main event. It gets a good amount of time. On paper, Matt, this looks like it's all set up to be a great match.
Yeah, if you're leading to the notion that this was not a great match, I would agree that it was not a great match. I thought it was a good match. They're great wrestlers, so they're not going to not have a good match. It's funny because sometimes these ROH matches go too long, but I feel like if this match had gone like 5 minutes longer, it actually would have been better because they were just sort of like getting to the good stuff when it ended. As it was, there was some awkwardness. Like I thought Joe had a little bit of an off night. I'm trying to look through my notes to get to like some of the stuff that he kind of messes up.
They botched a couple really simple moves. Like there's one where if I can look it up. Oh God,
a botched snapmare, which I don't know if I've ever seen that in my life. And like Samoa Joe and Roderick Strong do it, and I'm like, wow, like I guess anybody can have that happen.
And then later, Aries and Joe fuck up a headlock takeover, I think was, and I noticed that too. Like both, like I thought of all the things to, not only is it weird for these guys to ever botch these 4, but like 2 of the more simple, basic moves in wrestling that I never see botched.
Yeah, botching a snap mare, like it looked dangerous actually. Like Strong's neck was like really wrenched. I mean, luckily Roderick Strong has a thick ass neck and like he could handle it, but like yikes. But most of the match was professional and like Strong and Lethal. I thought you don't really get to see them too often square off. You hadn't really gotten to see Joe and Strong square off too much at this point yet either. So that was pretty cool. They Lethal gets worked on for a while, and Joe gets like what I would call a halfway hot tag, where he comes in and he hits a leg lariat on Aries and a big chop, and then Lethal's back in within a minute, which is something I've complained about a lot in some of these ROH matches, where like the hot tag, it's like you'd think the person who was taking the punishment would stick out for at least like 2 minutes, never mind, not like 45 seconds.
How you're always on my mind. I literally wrote my notes, Matt's pet peeve. I wrote in my notes. Because as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, Matt's not going to like this. Because you had just talked about this on a show about how much you don't like that.
It really does seem to happen in every ROH tag match in this era. Like, I don't think it should never happen, but like, it's like, it usually shouldn't, right? Like someone's being beaten up for like a really long time, and the whole storyline is they're tired and they need to get out, and then they come back in like seconds later. Like, clearly that's not logical.
I always feel like why, like even from like forget the storyline, how it doesn't make sense in terms of the wrestler's injured and the other guy's fresh. I even feel like if I just, part of the fun of the tag for me would be I get a rest. Like if I worked like 8 minutes straight and then I tag out to you and you do like 3 spots and tag me back in, I think even as a shoot, I'd be like, Matt, why'd you just do that? Like,
yeah,
I was just out here for so long. Like, please, like it's your turn.
Carry the load,
I would be annoyed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say, even though this match is between 2 faces, I think the crowd was more into cheering on Joe and Jay than they were to cheer Generation Next. That's just how I felt. Like when Joe and Lethal were beating up Aries, I don't feel like they were so into, rooting for Aries. Just didn't feel that way. There's another spot that kind of annoyed me, which is, so they do a thing where Lethal tags Joe, which is, and then the ref doesn't see it. Now, this was weird for a couple reasons. First of all, you very rarely do that spot with a team that's in control.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay and Joe were like in control. Like Lethal had it at hand, then he tags in Joe, but the ref doesn't see it. And like the reason you don't do that with a team that's in control is because then they could just be like, oh, okay, well actually now that you see it, let's just tag, right? Like, cause we're in control, so we don't have to fight for it. But for some reason the ref doesn't see it and Lethal still doesn't tag in Joe.
See, I think this is a rare shoot miss tag because you watch that. Yeah. Jay Lethal is expecting Joe to like do a double team with him, and then Jay, you can see like turns and looks to see like the ref talking to Joe, and then he just kind of gives up on it. Like I think this was like again another thing that echoes like how weird this match was. I think it was the rare shoot like missed tag.
But even if it was, then just tag him again. Like what's the like? It doesn't make any sense why you wouldn't just be like, okay, well you missed it. Okay, here now you can see it. Okay. Like, I don't understand it. But, like, you know, eventually Lethal does tag Joe. Aries gets the hot tag to Strong. And I do think that Strong's hot tag was very good. He hits a bunch of backbreakers and chops and a big drop kick on Joe. And he does double knees on Joe, but Joe drops out, gets the choke. Aries breaks that up. And then that allows Strong to cradle up Joe get a backbreaker for 2. And then Lethal comes in, hits the running vertical suplex and diving headbutt on Strong and covers, and Aries comes up with a double axe handle to break that up. And then they do this spot where like Aries drags Roderick to the corner and tags himself in so he can hit a brainbuster. And then Joe drags Lethal to the corner to tag himself in, and we get Aries and Joe going toe to toe. And you know, they go pretty strong. And I would say, actually, watching this is the one moment where I was sort of like, you know, another crowd would probably be rocking here for, like, the Joe and Aries stuff. And this crowd, you know, they were just, like, kind of into it. You know, maybe it was the match itself that just didn't get them hot for it. But I think the match
started... The Eddie Guerrero stuff, Matt, as Dave said.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think the match does start getting pretty hot here. Joe goes for a running clothesline. Aries tries to hit the crucifix bomb. Joe fights that off, but Strong hits the sick kick, which allows Aries to hit the crucifix bomb, which I thought was really cool. Then Lethal comes in with drop kicks, but Strong hits 2 half Nelson backbreakers on him, and Aries follows that with a frog splash, gets the win, pounds his chest beforehand to dedicate the move to Eddie. And like, I do think those last couple minutes were really good. That's why I say if they'd maybe gone a few more and did some more near falls, it could have elevated it to a much better match. But as it stands, it was pretty good. Some awkwardness, definitely disappointing.
I agree. This was disappointing. I actually liked it, I think, a little less than you. I was on the fence when I was finishing up my review of this match. Like, is this above average or very low good? I almost want to just go above average, which for these 4 guys in a semi-main event with this time, to me is very disappointing. And, yeah, they were just, you know, there was no real urgency in this match. It felt, if I could use a word to describe this match, it's reserved. This felt pretty reserved until those final few minutes. And like you were saying, how I completely agree. The final few minutes are really good. It's almost what pulls this match into like an overall good rating for me. If the more of the match was like that, it would have been an easy. But the weird thing is a lot of times, like, when a match gets good in the final few minutes, you're like, oh, maybe it ended too soon. It was just getting started, or like, you know, it didn't get enough time. But this got a good amount of time. And it really, rather than like, it's like revving up and just revving up too late, it felt to me almost like they just flicked a switch from the match from average to good. It was like, it felt like they could have wrestled more of the match like that at any time. And for some reason they decided, well, we're only going to wrestle like 3 to 5 minutes of a good match. And the rest of it, and a really good match at that, I think. And then the rest of it, we're just going to take it easy. And it's not that the rest of the work was bad. It just was very plain Jane mediocre. There's one sequence, I think, that sums up most of the match, other than, like we've already established, all the weird, like, botches that normally never happen in matches with these guys. But there's a spot fairly early on in the match. Well, not fairly early on, but that happens that really sums up this match to me, where Roderick and Joe are in the ring, and you know, Roderick makes a big deal of like tagging out to Aries because it would be the first time that Aries and Joe have been in the ring together in this match, and obviously they have all the world title feud history. And so he tags out. He's like, "Do you want it?" He tags to Aries. Aries comes in, and the crowd is pumped. There's dueling chants for both of them, and there's this kind of this energy you feel as they kind of stare across each other, like, "Oh man, this rivalry renewed. These 2 top guys." And then Matt, they do a sequence. This is the entire sequence: a headlock, a shoulder tackle, a second headlock, and Joe tags out. And to me, that sums up this match. Like, the table was set for them to do something really good. I think the crowd was ready. I think they had it in them to do something great. And they were just like, for most of the match, let's just do enough. Or even sometimes not enough. Like, to me, it was like headlock, shoulder tackle, headlock, tag. Like, that's it. And I was pretty disappointed at stuff like that.
Well, I guess if they had built up to more stuff, I mean, I guess it's okay to like do that at the beginning. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's okay to tease stuff and then save it for later.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I don't think it really had. Again, those final few minutes, you talked about all the cool stuff, really did pay off, were cool, but it didn't really, again, feel like payoffs to like stuff that was teased earlier as much as just they were like, well, we got to give him something. Let's give him a few after the hot tag. Let's go for it. And
yeah.
Those few minutes are really good. But Matt, you will rail on the New York crowd, and I feel like you have more of a right than me because they are your people. I don't rail on it as often. I do got to rail on it here. How you sometimes talk about and I don't always agree with you. I don't always agree with you that the New York crowds are worse than other crowds. This night, I think we agree they were.
And just before you do that, I just want to make clear, I do not consider the Long Island crowd to be my crowd. There is still a delineation between the New York City crowd and the Long Island crowd, which I think most people from the area will acknowledge.
Send angry complaints to Matt. No, so this is one of those just eye-rolling, snarky comments. And so Lethal's getting beat down at one point, and you can hear a fan clearly shout, "These are hate crimes. He's a minority." And you can hear like his one friend laugh. And I was just like, I wanted to make like the jerk off hand gesture as I was watching at home, just like, oh, yeah, you're real clever, but that's a real good one. You know, just like so often when people say, oh, crowds are just trying to get themselves over, like I feel like so often I think people are too hard on crowds, and I disagree. I think like they're just chanting things and having a good time. I felt like that was the kind of comment where that's when I like roll my eyes and like, just what a goofball.
To be fair, that's one guy. Now the chant at Jimmy Rave earlier, that was not one guy. So you could definitely hate on the crowd for that one.
After the match, Aries and Strong pose on the entranceway, and Jimmy Rave attacks them from behind, hitting them with a steel chair. Rave hits Strong with greetings from Ghana on the ramp and leaves. The refs come out to help out Strong, and boy, does Austin Aries angrily chew out Paul Turner for wondering what happened. Like Aries really yells at him in a way that feels almost real angry. Like, what, why didn't you see this? And then some fans chant, "Get them in the cage," and Aries like screams like, "Yeah, we will."
I thought that was good by Aries. Like, he acknowledged it. He was like, they're like, "Get him in the cage, which I'd never heard that chant before. But then Aries like kind of just goes, "We're going to get him in the cage," and then December 3rd. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the same market. It's good. Smart of you to acknowledge that chant.
I thought Aries during this whole this whole little segment was angry in an over the top way, but in like a good over the top way.
Yeah,
like, he was really pissed.
It worked
about everything.
The funniest part of this was they went back to the through the curtain, and they found Matt Sydal hanging upside down on a ladder.
Yeah,
and it just felt like schoolyard bully like running someone up the flagpole by their underwear. Like what do you like? Why was he upside down in a ladder? How did that happen?
And I love it because Aries continues being so pissed, and he has real like John Zandig Jesus like quote energy where he's just like, "What happened?" He's just screaming so angry, and he's so confused, and just the weird surrealness of like he just sees his friend get pedigreed in front of him after he gets attacked too, and then he walks through this curtain, and Matt Sydal is just hanging upside down from a ladder. He's like, "What the hell?" And then he punches a wall. He's so angry
because of course, what the hell? How do you end up upside down in a ladder?
And it's made more ridiculous because like all the refs just came through that curtain like 10-20 seconds earlier to like help him and Strong after they got attacked by Rave, and like Sydal is hanging upside down like basically 5 feet after you walk through the curtain, and it's like they didn't just see what happened. Like, how quickly did he get hung up upside down to the ladder? Like, wouldn't they have had to have walked by like seeing Matt Sydal hang upside down unconscious from a ladder? Like the whole segment was just really goofy, but in a way
I don't even think Sydal was unconscious, which made it funnier. I think he was just sort of like, "Oh, I'm upside down in a ladder."
Man, that'd be like, that reminds me of, there was this time in school growing up where we had the big batting cages behind the batting diamonds to kind of protect if the balls went high up, from like just a missed throw or anything. And kids used to love to climb the batting cages because the backstop or whatever you call it, because they got really high and the teachers would always tell kids not to. And I remember one day, one kid didn't show up after lunch. And we were all like, where is he? And the teacher was like, where were we? And also this other kid screams. He's like, he's hanging upside down from there. And he was in the Matt Sydal position. He had climbed near the top and got his foot stuck in like one of the rungs. And he was hanging, dangling upside down, and he couldn't get out. I think they had to call the fire department to like cut him free. And I just remember like seeing Matt Sydal like that. If you watch this video and see Matt Sydal is basically that kid at a much lower height. He's just stuck upside down by 1 foot in like this metal rung and just dangling.
That is scary.
I mean, he was fine, but it was just, I remember just like literally they had to call the fire department just like to get him.
So I not to step on your story, but it reminds me of another story of when I was in school.
Ahead.
Unrelated to this, but it just kind of reminded me. There was one day when I was a sophomore in high school where I got to school in the morning, and all the kids in the school were like on the field, like on the football field, like in the bleachers, just hanging out. And I found out they weren't letting anyone into the building because there was a gas leak in the building. And so we had to be outside on the field for I don't know, felt like at least a couple hours. But we weren't allowed to leave because it was the school day and you can't just let the kids leave. I don't know, for whatever reason. So they locked the gates and we were just all stuck in there. So kids, there were really, really high fences on the schoolyard, and kids started climbing up, trying to climb over the fences to just escape, to just leave school. And I just remember kids would start climbing over the fences. Then other kids would take off their shoes and throw them at the kids who were climbing over the fences. And this went on for hours as some of the teachers, I think at first were trying to stop them, but then eventually they were like, all right, forget it. Just let the stupid assholes do whatever they want. And then, and I don't know, it was just emblazoned in my mind, these kids climbing over the fence. And I definitely did not try to do that. I was just kind of sitting there being all right, well, at least I don't have to be in school.
And people don't know this, but one of your classmates was Vince Russo. He'd been held back a few years, and he invented the reverse battle royal based on. He was inspired by that. He was like, "Yeah, everyone trying to get out of something instead of into."
Vince Russo was already the main booker of the WWF when this was going on. So the main writer.
Matt, he got held back a lot.
Okay, fine. So he was writing Raw and also going to high school with me. Vince Russo is from Long Island. Damn it, not the same.
If you take one thing from this show, it's that we appreciate you. If you take two things from this show, it's we appreciate you, and Matt is not from Long Island. Please.
Exactly. Not that where I'm from is better, but it's not Long Island.
You mean it's better.
No, listen, Staten Island, I'm not saying it's better. Promise.
So that brings us to our main event, the Ring of Honor World Title match. Bryan Danielson successfully defends his world title when he defeats Christopher Daniels via pinfall in 29 minutes, 33 seconds after he hits a roaring elbow. So I believe this is a rematch from the second show in Ring of Honor. So that's a long time to go in one company without a rematch, although obviously Daniels was gone from the company for a year, but this is a rematch. And for those who go back, that's one of my little hidden gems. I really love that Danielson match from the second show. It's weird. This is something that I normally hate when people do. I did not like this match quite as much as this match, yet I think I gave this match a higher rating. Because I think I'm giving this a flat 4 stars. I think I gave that one a 3 3/4, but talked about how much I really liked it as a little hidden gem. But I think it's because this match, that match was an opener, a tight little story meant to be a fun opener, and it was. This match is meant to be, it has a higher ambition. It's a big half-an-hour main event. I feel like it doesn't quite hit its goal, its ambition quite as well as that match hit its, but its ambition is higher, so maybe that's why I can give it a little bit higher. But anyway, I think patterns are starting to emerge in this early section of Danielson's title run, and this match has a lot of the flaws and the strengths of the other ones. So the flaws would be, I would say, is Danielson dominates a lot of this match, like a lot of his other early title defenses against Sabin, the Roderick Strong matches. And in a way, it makes more sense for this match because part part of the story is Daniels had a much harder match than Danielson. That Danielson gave himself this really cupcake easy match, and Daniels had to work a hard, legit three-way. And so it makes sense that Danielson kind of is controlling Daniels in this match. But I feel like it does have one of the flaws where his control sequence, like some of those other matches, feels like it goes on just a little too long for me. And just like the Sabin match, I feel at some points like you don't get a lot of Daniels' personality. I feel like at times anyone could be Danielson's opponent in this match because he's controlling so much of it. But I also think a lot of that is on Daniels too in this match, because I feel like when Daniels gets control in this match, he's not showing a lot of fire or personality. I mean, he's doing well enough in the wrestling. There's one moment where he throws the I have till 5 back in Danielson's face when he's in control. I wish there was more of that, because Danielson's character at this point is so fun and is such a lovable, just huge prick. I think a lot of the fun is what that brings out of other wrestlers. Like we talked about in the second Roderick Strong Danielson match, how in the first 10 minutes I really enjoyed because it was Strong kind of like not putting up with Danielson's shit anymore and getting right back in his face. And I wish we'd have got a bit of that from Daniels here, because Bryan is being such a dick to him and Daniels is kind of being fairly submissive. And even with his comebacks, it's just kind of nondescript wrestling. But all that being said, all the strengths of the Danielson matches are here too. And the strengths are Bryan Danielson is just on another level since the few matches earlier when he kind of discovered this last piece of his wrestling puzzle that we've talked about. And I mentioned earlier, he is just having so much fun here. He is just so great of not just controlling the match, but somehow he has always been a confident wrestler. He feels 400% more confident. He's having so much fun. It's just infectious, the joy he is having working here. And the thing I really noticed in this match is I feel like a thing a lot of wrestlers have a hard time with is they learn to wrestle really well first and they don't have the charisma part, or they learn the character part first and they don't really have the wrestling part. And the last thing great wrestlers often learn is how to integrate, like how to be a great character in the match while having a great match. Because sometimes a wrestler, like they'll do interesting things in talking to the crowd, but they kind of slow the match to a crawl. If you watch Danielson in this match, he is so good about filling all the little gaps of the match with crowd interactions, but it never feels like he's dragging the match to a halt to just like do a comedy act or start talking to the crowd. Like every moment in this match, he's like doing something. And I feel like you watch him in this match and it feels like this is one of those matches where it feels like the entire wrestling match and the entire crowd is this toy box and Danielson is just playing. Like he seems so comfortable in a match like this. Like just every moment, he always seems like he knows exactly what he wants to do. You never feel like at a moment that he's at a loss at what he wants to do next or a loss for ideas. He's like really in the moment reacting to the crowd. And I just was really admiring his performance here. And the match is good. You know, it tells its usual kind of simple stories of body parts getting worked on. And we can get into the ending plays off of apparently things that happened in TNA. But it's like a flat 4-star match. It could have been better. But like Danielson's so good, this is kind of like the bar for him is this good. And I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I like this match. I thought it was a 4-star match too, but like my adjectives I think would be higher than yours. Like you said, this is the bar for him, but like I don't know if I agree with that. Like I think it's better than most of the matches he's had as champion so far. I thought it was better than the Aries match. I thought it was better than the Carino match. I thought it was better than the Sabin match. The only matches that I think were not as good, wasn't as good as, were the Strong matches. I thought this was Daniel's best performance. I think that's one thing we disagree on. I thought it was Daniel's best performance since his return. I thought they took a crowd. This was not like a hot match. You know, this wasn't a match they had built to. And a lot of Daniels's previous title matches, title defenses, no one in the crowd thought that he could lose, so that kind of hurt the big pops at the end. But the crowd is really popping here at the end. Like, I think there was a moment where they thought that Daniels could win. And I think that's to the match's credit. So, like, I don't necessarily think that we have a disagreement about the level of the match got to, but maybe just our satisfaction with that level.
One thing I'll ask you, though, Art, you said it was better than the Aries match, which I might agree with you. I definitely agree with you. It was better than the Carino match and the say the match. Here's the thing: how much better? Because I think I would say like this match is like to me like a quarter star better than like it's better, but like one notch better. Like it's not a huge world of difference, in my opinion.
I think that's fair. I think I could probably get behind that. I would agree. But I still think it was a higher level, like whatever, even if it was slightly higher. The one thing I will say, yeah, like I do think like Danielson is making it sort of like the standard that we're going to get these half-hour world title main events. And I don't necessarily think that's always to a match's benefit.
Yeah.
I do think that he's just figuring it out. And like, so yeah, it's so much fun when he's in control and doing cool stuff. Like there's this one point where he does an Indian deathlock and he pushes the knee, like gets it in one form where he pushes on the knee with his leg. But then he does like a full neck bridge with the Indian deathlock. Then he keeps the Indian deathlock on, but does like a butterfly hold. And he's just like holding the Indian deathlock while doing like one thing after another and like changing it up. And like, that's so much fun. But yeah, it does last a long time. Like, I think if they had cut 5 minutes off, like maybe put that 5 minutes onto the tag team match and took it off of this one, but did everything else the same, I think both matches would have been all the better for it.
Yeah.
That ending sequence is really good. They get some really, really good near falls there. I also really liked it because you had mentioned how Danielson like just sort of like dropped the airplane spin from his repertoire.
Yeah.
And at one point he teases it, but then he gives the crowd the middle finger and does a Finley roll instead. And it's just like because we're not going to see the airplane spin much anymore.
Yeah.
And I like that, but like when Daniels got the Koji clutch in after his Death Valley driver, the crowd was really into that. And, I thought that, Danielson really crawled for a long time to make the ropes. They even do a tease where Danielson's arm drops twice, but then he finally lifts the third time and gets the ropes. Danielson gets the cattle mutilation after Daniels avoids a dragon suplex. And Daniels really struggles for that. By the way, how hard was it to keep track of Daniels and Danielson in the notes? Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But they do really dramatic stuff. Like Danielson misses a roaring forearm, Daniels ducks, hits the Uranagi and the BME, and the crowd popped big for Danielson's kick out there. Like I thought they really thought that could have been it. They were very behind Daniels here. Danielson hit the top rope suplex and then hit the dragon suplex with the bridge and went right into cattle mutilation. And I thought that would be the finish, but Daniels powered out of that and he's able to like roll out and stand up. And then Danielson tries to go for the chicken wing and Daniels fights off of that. And then Danielson just hits the big roaring elbow, which they treat as like a full knockout. There's even a little delay before the cover and Danielson has to like struggle to turn him over. And then he gets the pin on that. So I thought the ending sequence was fantastic, like one of the best that we've seen in a while. And I thought that elevated the match a lot. I thought the rest of the match was good. I really didn't have a big problem with like a lack of Daniels' personality, honestly. Like I see what you're saying though, now that you mention it. I will say another cool thing I liked is that they like at the beginning of the match, they really milk the whole Daniels won't shake hands thing a lot, which you don't really see wrestlers do, in the sense that like, Daniels says no, and Danielson just keeps trying to shake his hand.
Yeah.
I like that little touch.
He's being almost a dick about because he knows he won't shake his hand. He's just going to like rub it in his face like, sure? You sure? Exactly.
Imagine WWE allowing a match between someone named Daniels and someone named Danielson. Never would happen. And Leonard, just like in the other Danielson match, he really like goes big on what an asshole Danielson is. He's really outraged by it. And also there's one thing he says early on. He says, this is a matchup between two of the biggest red asses you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then he says that they're cranky. And I'm like, I don't know that I've heard that expression before.
It's funny. I was thinking, I've heard that a couple times. And then I started thinking, has the other couple times I've heard also been from Lenny Leonard? Like, I was like, is he the only one? Like,
yeah, I don't know that one. But now I know. I mean, they're cranky, I guess.
I mean, for all I know, my ass gets very red when I'm angry. I don't think anyone's ever seen me angry when I was naked.
Never?
Well, the future, Matt. I gotta save something for my 40s.
All right.
I got a few other things in my notes. I actually wrote a lot of notes for this match. One thing we didn't mention: there was huge dueling chants for their ring introductions. Like I timed it. It was a minute and a half straight of back and forth. Let's go Fallen Angel. Let's go Dragon, back and forth that they just let happen. The crowd does not run out of steam for like a minute and a half. They just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The crowd, I think at one point, I'm not sure. I meant to ask you, was there a point early on in this match where the crowd was trying to start a 60 minutes chant?
I did not notice that.
Because I think
sounds possible.
Praise X is like kind of adorable, and I wonder if Alice in Danger was still there, knowing that they were friends. Like Praise X at one point, because Alice in Danger on a lot of these shows, including this one, was wearing that latex nun outfit, and Praise X goes at one point, "Is this supposed to rain later in the day? What's with the outfit?" And I thought that sounds like something like your dad would say if you were going out to a club wearing that. Like,
I'm sure that was for her ears. Yeah,
I thought that was kind of adorable. At one point in the match, you can hear Green Lantern fan yell, 8 minutes gone, 8 minutes. And I thought, wow, they really did think this match was going long. Which I think that was one of the points, because we'll see in another later strong Danielson match. Like, I think one of the things Danielson and maybe Gabe too wanted was they wanted to create this idea of fans thinking that matches not only would go long, but could go really long, but still end before the hour,
Right,
and so,
right. They don't actually do the 60-minute draw with Danielson until the summer of 2006.
Yeah, so that was probably part of the long match, other than I think just Danielson loves wrestling long matches, is like, let's train fans to think, that match could end at any time, and it could go really long, but just, because initially, with stuff like the Danielson, the Punk Joe matches, the first two, I think there was maybe fear that if you did one more draw shortly after those two, you would start to train the fans that, like, if a match goes above 40 minutes, half an hour, it's going to go to a 60 time limit draw. And you obviously don't want that. So, there's a moment in the match where Danielson, rare from Danielson, he yells at Alice in Danger. He says, "You shut your mouth before I slap you right in the face." And I was like, wow. Brian Danielson getting in the Ring of Honor spirit there.
Yeah, the Ring of Honor spirit, exactly.
Danielson at one point, he is doing a double bridge in a move, and he flips off the fan with the double bird upside down while he's just bridging with his neck, which, unbelievable, cool stuff.
He should be the star of Bridgerton. I've never even seen that show, but I know it has the word bridge in the title, so...
That's our first sponsorship. Clearly a lot of crossover between Bridgerton and us. Daniels came into the show, we should mention, with a bandage on his head from, I guess, an earlier injury on a different wrestling show. It comes off of this match, and he starts bleeding. And I love Danielson's gleeful. He goes, "Uh-oh," when he notices Daniels is cut. And he immediately starts tearing it. And he just gives such a playful, like, uh-oh, like such a, like, "Ooh, I'm a little stinker." And then he starts tearing the cut. And he actually bites Daniel's cut to the point where he gets blood smeared on his mouth, which I thought, wow, like, intense from Danielson. And yeah, that Koji clutch one you mentioned was great. There was another great little wrinkle to it where Daniels actually, like, puts his foot, as Danielson is reaching to grab the ropes, Daniels, like, takes his foot and pulls back Danielson's arm with his foot, which I thought, and then Danielson has to, like, reach the ropes with his legs instead of his arm, which was a really cool moment. And yeah, like, I feel like maybe I was more focused on the flossless match. Clearly, like, looking at my notes, there were so many moments I really, really enjoyed, which is why I think it's a great match. So I'm glad I kind of got to go through it. And let me just say, the end, if it did feel like a little abrupt, like the crowd wasn't expecting it, Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer, "The idea of the finish was the forearm knocked Daniels out because he was recovering from a concussion in the TNA pay-per-view angle. So they played off that. Daniels seemed knocked silly and laid in the ring for several minutes after the match." I don't think this was a shoot. Dave almost seems to act like it was. But it is interesting that I do think, Matt, we are now in this era of Ring of Honor where they were playing more off of TNA stuff than they ever had before. Like, AJ Styles came into the ring for his match wearing the X Division title, and he had done that before, but even the start of that three-way, it's him and Daniels constantly arguing, and then them kind of just like pushing Matt Sydal out of the way. Like they are playing off more TNA feuds, I feel like, in Ring of Honor at this point.
Yeah, I don't know how long that lasts for, but they definitely are at this point, yeah.
And so next we go to Samoa Joe and Jay Lethal backstage. Joe calls tonight a temporary setback. He says he and Lethal will be back, and they will realize Joe's dream of becoming Ring of Honor's first Grand Slam Triple Crown champion. Jay looks very bummed though, and when Joe asks Jay if he's all right, Jay says, "I can't deal with this." And he walks away like a moody teenager. Joe calls after him, but Jay isn't coming back, so foreshadowing that.
Yeah, so the Lethal turns heel in the next show. Spoilers.
Yeah.
And like, I do think that, this is a fairly decent way to set it up in the sense of like, Joe is so obsessed with his own journey, and Lethal is just sort of like, I'm bringing you along for the ride, Jay Lethal. And like, obviously that would be insulting for Jay Lethal. But in retrospect, it's like hindsight being 2020. Obviously, that heel turn did not work for Jay Lethal.
Yeah.
They really were trying to build him up so much in ROH in 2005, and then he's basically gone from the company by like the third month of 2006, which is a pretty crazily fast decline for him in that company. So obviously, that heel turn was not for the best for him.
And doesn't it feel? We've probably talked about this before, but doesn't it feel crazy that like he did seem to have some momentum, and then this low-key feud that's supposed to end with him getting something that's pretty rare in the indies, which is a guy getting a win over low-key. That really felt like, once that happened, it felt like all his momentum was gone. Which is weird, because that was on paper, I'm sure they'd drawn it up as like, that's supposed to be the thing that was supposed to elevate him to the next level. And since that match, he feels like he's just been drifting, like no momentum, no real direction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, maybe like instead of that, a feud with Nigel would have been better for him, over the pure title. Like, I feel like maybe that would have been more suited to his strengths. But hey, like I said, hindsight 2020. Yeah.
And finally, we end, as Matt mentioned this earlier. There's a brief clip from a Night of Appreciation with the crowd chanting, "We will miss you," as that was the farewell show to Eddie Guerrero in Ring of Honor. We see Eddie Guerrero as he's standing, looking, maybe crying even in the ring. And it's a nice little sweet way to end the show. And that brings us to the end of the show. That was a night of tribute. Matt, it's an interesting show. It's weird, like people don't remember the show, but there's a great match on it. There's a match that's close to, I think, being really great. There's some good stuff on the undercard. There's a really great promo. Like, there's a lot to like on this show, actually.
This is one of the hidden gems of the year, I would say. Like, this is a damn good show. I think they're actually, ROH is on a pretty good run of shows at this point. And this is one of them, like, it's not like the best show of the year, but like, this is just good stuff. I think like they had kind of a rough patch. It's somewhat near like mid 2005 as far as some dull shows. I think we're over that now. I think Danielson as champion is a big part of it, but other stuff too. This was a good show. I would say this was really quite good. I had a lot of good stuff. Only one really disappointing match. And again, even that was not bad, but like the good stuff was really good. So, and I even had some good promos on it, which you don't see much on ROH DVDs. So I was a big fan of this show.
Yeah, I agree. You get the one great match, and I agree where like you even get some different stuff. Like I think this show, even without the great match, would be going out of your way to see for a certain kind of fan, because I think if you're a big Bryan Danielson fan, you've never really seen a match like the one he has against Asriel. Like it's going to be a weird curiosity. And I think, if you're a big Colt Cabana fan, you've probably never seen him cut a promo quite like he's cut on this show. And then there's some really good wrestling on top of that.
Yeah, in terms of importance, this is a B show. Like, it's not like they have any major blow-offs or anything like that. But, like, in terms of just good quality entertainment, like building for the future, this is, doesn't feel like a B show.
Yeah, I completely agreed. And so that brings us to the end of the show. So for plugs, as usual, through the years at gmail.com. That's THROH for through. If you want to email us, we have a thread on the ProWrestlingOnly.com plugs forum, which is also just a great forum for all sorts of wrestling talk, lots of old archive stuff there, even that's just, you could spend days reading through like discussions of old wrestling. That's some really good conversations. Twitter, I'm at Trevor Dame. Matt is at Mayor MGF. And next time on the show, we will be covering Steel Cage Warfare, a show that feels like, maybe because we just take so long between episodes, a show that feels like they've been hyping it forever. because they announced it pretty early into that feud. We finally get to see, you know, Ring of Honor's first, but not their last take on a War Games match.
And I get to talk about the infamous Basketball City.
I honestly can't wait. And also, there is another Steve Corino Homicide match, you know, a rematch of our 2003 match of the year. It's not as well remembered, and there's probably good reasons why. We will rediscover those reasons and explain them probably rewatching the show. But yeah, that should be a lot of fun. We are, you know, we only got 2 shows left before, and then the year's over, and we're doing all our recaps of everything. We're in a fun time, and it's been a fun 5 years. Thank you for everybody that's been a part of it. We hope you're going to stay on with us as long as we keep doing this crazy thing. So then, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.